My mom secretly promised my house to her golden child, so I evicted him, changed the locks, and uncovered a decades-old family secret. I, 28 Midas, have been living in my own house for the past 3 years. I bought this place with my own money in Portland, Oregon. I've worked my absolute butt off since I was 17 years old, skipping parties, working double shifts, and saving every single penny I could scrape together. Finally, at 25, I managed to get a beautiful, decent-sized 3-bedroom house in a quiet, safe neighborhood. It's nothing insanely fancy or luxurious, but it is mine. I've put hundreds of hours of sweat equity into making it exactly how I want it, refinishing the original hardwood floors, painting the walls, and upgrading the fixtures. My absolute pride and joy is the master bedroom. It's spacious, gets incredible morning sunlight, and has a beautiful ensuite bathroom with a double vanity that I saved up for months to remodel. About 8 months ago, my younger brother Leo, who is 20, dropped out of university. He had been struggling heavily with his grades, skipping classes, and apparently, the academic pressure was just entirely too much for him to handle. My mom, Brenda, has absolutely babied this kid since the day he was born. Because he's the youngest, he's always been treated as the sensitive one, the delicate artistic soul who requires special understanding and endless accommodations. Meanwhile, I've been working grueling hours in logistics management since I was a teenager, paying my own way through life, and not once has anybody ever stopped to worry about my stress levels or my mental health. When Leo officially dropped out, Mom called me in tears. She asked if he could stay with me for just a few short weeks while he figured things out, decompressed, and looked for a job. I said yes because, at the end of the day, he is my little brother and I love him. I set him up in one of my 2 guest bedrooms. It is a genuinely nice room. It's a great size, has a massive walk-in closet, a comfortable queen-sized bed, and a large window. The only thing it doesn't have is the private ensuite bathroom that my master bedroom has. He just has to walk exactly 4 steps down the hall to use the main guest bathroom, which he has entirely to himself anyway. Fast forward to yesterday. Mom comes over for our traditional Sunday dinner. She does this every single week. Afterwards, while I'm clearing the plates, she puts her hand on my arm and asks to speak with me privately in the living room. She sits down, sighs heavily, and starts going on and on about how Leo is really struggling mentally, how he feels stagnant, and how he desperately needs space to heal and grow into adulthood. Then, she drops the absolute bomb on me. She looks me dead in the eye and says she thinks I should give Leo my master bedroom. Her reasoning? The master bedroom is bigger, has much better natural light, features the ensuite bathroom, and I kid you not would give Leo the dignity and privacy a young man needs during this incredibly difficult transition. She actually used the word, times dignity, as if living completely rent-free in a beautiful guest bedroom in someone else's house somehow strips a person of their dignity. I honestly thought she was making a bizarre joke at first. I let out a little laugh and waited for the punchline. When I realized she was dead serious, her face completely stone cold, I immediately said, absolutely not. That is my bedroom. In my house. That I pay the mortgage on every single month. Leo has been living here rent-free for 8 months, eating the groceries I buy, using my high-speed internet, driving up my utility bills, and contributing absolutely nothing to the household. And now, I am somehow supposed to give up my own bed and my own private sanctuary, too? Mom's immediate response was to cross her arms, glare at me, and tell me that I was being incredibly selfish and completely failing to think about family. She said Leo is at a crucial developmental stage and that having a nice, premium space could really boost his mental health and daily motivation. She literally pointed out that because I am established in my career and mature enough to handle a smaller room, I should take the guest room, while Leo needs all the environmental support he can get. She also specifically mentioned that the ensuite bathroom would be significantly better for Leo, because he is shy about his body and gets uncomfortable using the hallway bathroom when I have friends over. For the record, I have people over maybe once a month for a couple of beers, and whenever I do, Leo completely locks himself in his room with his noise-canceling headphones the entire time anyway. The conversation quickly devolved. It ended with her standing up, calling me a heartless, materialistic brother, and saying, "Your father would be so unbelievably disappointed in the man you've become." My dad, Arthur, passed away 6 years ago from a sudden heart attack. She knows damn well that invoking his name is the lowest possible blow she could ever deliver. She grabbed her purse and left my house in a massive huff, slamming the front door behind her. Leo hasn't come out of his room since. I can hear him constantly whispering on the phone, presumably with Mom, and I am absolutely certain that I am being painted as the ultimate villain of the century in whatever narrative they are spinning. Here is what really gets under my skin and makes my blood boil. Leo isn't even trying to get his life together. Not even a little bit. He sleeps until 1 p.m. every single day, plays competitive video games until 4 a.m., leaves his dirty dishes all over the kitchen counter, and talks endlessly about maybe starting a Twitch streaming channel or becoming a professional esports player. He has made zero tangible effort to find a job, update his resume, or look into community college classes. His hard time seems to consist exclusively of having way too much free time, zero responsibilities, and zero consequences. Meanwhile, I am working 50 to 60 hours a week managing a massive supply chain team, paying every single bill, buying all the food, cooking the meals, and basically acting as a free luxury hotel service for a grown adult. But somehow, in their twisted reality, I am the bad guy for not wanting to give up my own bedroom in my own house. I'm starting to second guess myself, though. Mom has been relentlessly texting me links to psychology articles about supporting family members through severe mental health struggles and the vital importance of creating healing environments for trauma. She is expertly making me feel like I am being a selfish monster who doesn't care about his own flesh and blood's well-being. Am I being completely unreasonable here? Should I just give up the bedroom for a few months to keep the peace and help him out? Part of me wonders if I'm being way too rigid and territorial about my house and my rules, but another part of me feels like this is a completely insane, unhinged request. Help me out here, Reddit. Edit. Since several people asked in the comments, no, Leo does not pay a single dime in rent or contribute to any household expenses whatsoever. The original verbal agreement was that he would stay for exactly 3 weeks while aggressively job hunting. It has now been 8 months. He also absolutely does not help with any household chores unless I specifically hunt him down and ask him to do it, and even then, it's done begrudgingly with heavy sighs and eye rolls. Update 1, 2 weeks later. Well, Reddit, you are not going to believe how astronomically this situation has escalated. First off, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who responded to my original post. The unanimous consensus that I was not being unreasonable gave me the exact backbone and reality check I desperately needed. Unfortunately, things have gotten so much worse than I ever could have imagined. After reading your comments, I decided to have a calm, rational, adult conversation with Leo. I sat him down at the kitchen table and explained that while I am happy to help him through this rough patch, we urgently need to establish some firm boundaries and basic expectations. I suggested we create a concrete timeline for him to find part-time work or enroll in some certification classes, and requested that he start contributing to the household chores at a bare minimum like taking out the trash and loading the dishwasher. Leo's response? He immediately started crying, full-on, hyperventilating tears, saying I was pressuring him just like everyone else at his old university, and that I didn't understand the sheer weight of what he was going through. When I gently asked him to help me understand what exactly he was going through, he just vaguely waved his hands, said it was complicated trauma, and that he needed more time and space to figure himself out. I held firm. I kept my voice calm but authoritative, telling him he could have all the time and space he needed in the guest bedroom, provided he started looking for work. That is when he dropped this absolute gem of a sentence. Mom said you'd probably come around to giving me the big room once you thought about it more. My blood ran cold. Turns out, my mother had already explicitly told Leo that the master bedroom was his. She had literally promised him my room without my permission, behind my back. They had apparently been discussing for weeks how he could redecorate it, where he would put his dual monitor streaming setup, and what color LED lights he would put behind the headboard. I was blindingly furious. I called my mom immediately and told her in no uncertain terms that she had absolutely no right to promise my bedroom to anyone on this planet. Her response? She used her sweet, condescending customer service voice and said she just knew I'd do the right thing eventually, and that she was just helping Leo visualize his healing space, so he could manifest a better mental state. She actually used the term healing space with a straight face. I made it crystal clear, using very small, direct words, that Leo would not be getting my bedroom, period. End of discussion. I also turned to Leo and told him that if he wasn't happy with the massive, free accommodation he was currently getting, he was more than welcome to pack his bags and move back in with Mom. That shut down the waterworks pretty quickly. For about a week, things were incredibly tense but relatively quiet. Leo sulked in his room, only coming out to microwave pizza rolls. Mom sent me a barrage of passive-aggressive quotes on Instagram about family values and narcissistic siblings, but at least nobody was actively trying to steal my bedroom. Then came yesterday. I came home from a particularly brutal, exhausting 12-hour day at work. I walked through the front door and immediately heard loud laughter and thumping bass coming from upstairs. I walked up the stairs to find my master bedroom door wide open, and Leo inside with 3 of his friends. They were sitting on my bed with their dirty sneakers on, using my expensive OLED TV, and had greasy pizza boxes and open cans of Mountain Dew spread out across my expensive oak dresser. But here is the absolute kicker. Leo was literally giving them a grand tour of his new room, and showing them exactly where he planned to mount his gaming setup and ring lights. I lost my absolute mind. I stepped into the room and told his friends to get out of my house immediately. They scattered like terrified roaches, grabbing their skateboards, muttering apologies, and avoiding eye contact as they practically sprinted down the stairs. Leo, though, had the sheer audacity to be furious with me. He puffed out his chest and accused me of humiliating him in front of his friends and completely ruining his social life. When I demanded to know what the hell he thought he was doing in my private space, he smugly said Mom had told him it was totally fine to start getting comfortable in the room since I would obviously cave soon. He had even started moving his stuff into my walk-in closet. My closet. There were literal anime body pillows and posters propped against my suits, and his heavy gaming chair was already assembled in the corner, scraping against my pristine hardwood floors. The entitlement was so heavy it was breathtaking. This kid genuinely believed that my bedroom was already his property, and I was just being a stubborn roadblock delaying the inevitable. I told him to get his stuff out immediately. He crossed his arms and refused, saying Mom said he could keep his things there to claim the energy of the room. So, I did what any reasonable homeowner would do. I grabbed his gaming chair, his posters, and his pillows, and I started hauling his crap out into the hallway myself. Leo immediately pulled out his phone, called Mom crying hysterically, and within 20 short minutes, she was banging on my front door. The confrontation was incredibly ugly. She stormed in and accused me of traumatizing Leo and being physically violent. I wasn't violent. I just moved his plastic chair and his pillows. She screamed that she was creating a hostile living environment. She said Leo had been so incredibly excited and motivated about having a nice space for his streaming career, and I had maliciously crushed his spirit out of pure jealousy. I reminded her, loudly, that this is my house, purchased with my money, the mortgage is in my name, and I decide who sleeps where. Her response was a masterclass in delusion. She claimed that family homes belong to the whole family regardless of whose name is on a silly piece of paper, and that I was being deeply materialistic by focusing on legal ownership rather than Leo's emotional needs. When logic failed, she tried her favorite tactic, tears. My 55-year-old mother actually collapsed onto my sofa, sobbing hysterically about how agonizing it's been for her to watch Leo struggle, how she just desperately wants him to be happy, and how she thought I'd be much more understanding given the grief our family has been through since Dad died. But I held firm. I felt nothing but exhaustion. I told her, Leo has a perfectly good room, and if that is not sufficient for his precious energy, he is welcome to leave right this second. I also made it explicitly clear that if I ever found him in my room again without my permission, I would be changing the locks on my bedroom door. Mom left in a wailing fit of tears. Leo locked himself in his room, the guest room, and I sat in my kitchen wondering how on earth my life had suddenly morphed into a cheap daytime soap opera. I started to see a massive pattern that I was completely blind to before. Leo has always been entirely insulated from reality. When he failed his classes in high school, Mom went down there and blamed the teachers for not accommodating his learning style. When he couldn't hold a simple retail job at 17, it was because the managers were toxic and too demanding. When he dropped out of university, it was the institution's fault for not nurturing his unique potential. And now, I am the bad guy for not giving up my bedroom. It is always someone else's responsibility to accommodate Leo. It is never Leo's responsibility to adapt to reality. I immediately went to the hardware store and bought a heavy-duty deadbolt for my bedroom door. I installed it that night. Update 2, 1 month later. Reddit, I am back with another update, and honestly, I don't even know where to begin. The last 4 weeks have been absolutely insane, and I have learned some dark things about my family's history that have completely shattered and reshaped my entire perspective on my life. After my last update, I genuinely thought things would calm down. I had changed the locks on my bedroom door, established crystal clear boundaries, and assumed Leo and Mom would eventually accept reality. God, I was so incredibly naive. For about 2 weeks, Leo barely spoke a single word to me. He would sneak out of his room at 2 a.m., grab handfuls of snacks from the pantry, and scurry back to his room like a feral raccoon. Mom was giving me the ultimate cold shoulder, responding to my texts with passive-aggressive one-word answers, and entirely skipping our weekly Sunday dinners. I was actually thoroughly enjoying the absolute peace and quiet. Then, I made a massive mistake. I had to go away for a weekend logistics conference in Seattle. It was only 2 nights, and I figured Leo could handle being alone in the house for 48 hours. I even left him a $50 bill for takeout pizza and told him exactly what my expectations were: no parties, absolutely no guests in my private spaces, and keep the kitchen clean. I came back on Sunday evening to an absolute disaster zone. Leo had thrown a massive party. It wasn't just a few friends, it was enough people to completely trash my living room and kitchen. There were sticky alcohol stains on my custom sofa, empty beer bottles and liquor handles everywhere, half-eaten food ground into the rugs, and someone had definitely puked in the downstairs powder room and left it there to bake in the heat. But that wasn't the worst part. I sprinted upstairs, my heart pounding in my throat. My bedroom door was wide open. The heavy-duty deadbolt lock I had installed had been completely removed. It was literally unscrewed from the solid wood door, leaving splintered holes behind. And inside, it was a nightmare of violation. My bed was unmade and smelled like cheap weed and body odor. There were more empty bottles on my nightstand, leaving water rings on the wood. My personal ensuite bathroom had clearly been heavily used, with wet towels thrown on the floor. But the absolute cherry on top of this nightmare Sunday? Leo's massive gaming setup, the dual monitors, the LED lights, the heavy desk, and the microphone boom arm was fully assembled and plugged in right in the corner of my master bedroom. He had moved in. I called him immediately. He wasn't home. He didn't answer. I called Mom. She answered on the second ring, sounding incredibly chipper, and before I could even get a word out, she said, "Now, Mark, before you overreact." Turns out, she had actively helped him remove the lock. She had driven over while I was in Seattle, brought her own personal toolbox from her garage, and physically helped Leo unscrew my lock and move all his heavy furniture into my room because, in her psychotic words, it was the perfect, stress-free opportunity to make the transition while you weren't there to make it difficult and negative. I cannot adequately describe the blinding, white-hot rage I felt in that exact moment. This wasn't just about a bedroom anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was about my mother actively conspiring with and helping my brother break into my locked, private sanctuary in the home that I own. I told her she had exactly 1 hour to get over here with Leo and get his stuff out of my room, or I was calling the police. She laughed. She actually giggled into the receiver and said, "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Mark, you wouldn't call the cops on your own family." She was dead wrong. I hung up, dialed the non-emergency police line, and explained that a family member had dismantled the locks on my interior doors and moved their belongings into my private space without authorization. The officer who came out, Officer Davis, was incredibly professional and surprisingly helpful. Mom and Leo showed up in record time once they saw the police cruiser parked in my driveway. Mom came storming up the walkway, ready to scream at me, but froze the second she saw the badge. Officer Davis explained to Leo and my mother that yes, what they did was technically breaking and entering and destruction of private property, and yes, I was well within my legal rights to press formal charges if I wanted to. The look on my mother's face was absolutely priceless. It belongs in a museum. She went from arrogant and indignant to utterly terrified in about 2 seconds flat. Her jaw literally dropped. Leo just stood there looking completely shocked, his eyes wide, like he couldn't physically comprehend that there were actual, real-world consequences for his actions. I decided not to press criminal charges, but I absolutely used the massive leverage I now had. Standing right there in front of the officer, I told Leo he had exactly 30 days to find alternative housing and get out of my house. Officer Davis helped mediate this and even stood there while I wrote up a formal, signed 30-day eviction notice on a legal pad. Mom tried to argue, her voice shaking, but the cop shut her down incredibly quickly, explaining in a stern voice that I was being extremely generous by giving them any notice at all instead of putting him in handcuffs. The next few days were insanely tense. Leo moved all his stuff back to the guest room in complete silence and hasn't dared go anywhere near my bedroom since. Mom has been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between vicious guilt trips, "How could you threaten your own flesh and blood with jail time?" and emotional manipulation. "Your father is looking down on you with such shame." But here is where things get truly interesting, and where everything finally clicked into place for me. My Aunt Sarah, Mom's older sister, reached out after hearing through the family grapevine about the massive police drama. She asked if we could meet for coffee, completely off the record. What she told me over lattes was earth-shattering. Apparently, this toxic dynamic with Leo is not new at all. When my parents were still married, my dad constantly fought vicious, screaming matches with Mom about her babying Leo. It was the single major source of tension in their marriage. Dad desperately wanted Leo to face consequences and learn basic responsibility, while Mom always swooped in to save him from reality. Aunt Sarah told me about major incidents I either had forgotten or never even knew about. Like when Leo was 14 and stole $300 cash from Dad's hidden office safe. Mom secretly replaced the money from her own savings so Leo wouldn't get grounded. Or when Leo was caught blatantly cheating on his final exams at 16. Mom went down to the high school, threatened to sue the principal, and argued until they caved and agreed to let him retake the test with zero academic penalty. The pattern goes back over a decade. She also told me a secret that made me break down in tears right there in the coffee shop. Dad had actually set aside a massive chunk of money specifically for me in a completely separate, secret trust account that Mom had absolutely no access to. He did this because he was terrified of exactly this kind of situation happening. He knew Mom would drain every single asset they had to baby Leo, and he wanted to make sure I wasn't left with nothing. I did receive this money after he passed away, and it's actually what allowed me to put the down payment on my house, but I never knew the painful reasoning behind why it was kept a secret from Mom. The conversation with Aunt Sarah made me realize this entire nightmare isn't really about a master bedroom at all. It is about a deeply ingrained, toxic family dynamic that has been building like a pressure cooker for years, and I have been unknowingly enabling it by constantly trying to be the good son and keeping the peace. So, I made a massive decision. I stuck to the 30-day notice despite the constant, agonizing pressure from Mom and extended family members. I also finally started seeing a therapist, which has been incredibly helpful in unpacking all of this generational family dysfunction. Leo has been frantically looking for places to live, suddenly highly motivated now that he realizes I am deadly serious and the police have a record of his behavior. Mom offered to let him move back in with her, but apparently, he doesn't want to because her condo is way too small and doesn't have fiber optic internet for his streaming. The sheer irony is absolutely delicious. We are now at day 26 of the 30-day notice. Leo has found a small room to rent in a house with 3 other guys his age, and he is officially moving out this coming weekend. Mom is barely speaking to me, but honestly, the peace in my mind is worth every second of her silence. I know this isn't the magical update some of you might have wanted. There is no big, beautiful redemption arc where Leo suddenly becomes a hyper-responsible adult, or where mom breaks down in tears and realizes she has been a terrible parent. But real life is so much messier than that. Sometimes, the absolute best you can do is establish ironclad boundaries and stick to them, even when it means permanently damaging relationships. Final update, 3 months later. Hello Reddit. I promised a final update once the dust entirely settled. And boy, do I have a story for you. It has been 3 full months since Leo officially moved out of my house, and the situation has evolved in ways I never, ever could have predicted in a million years. First, let me address the immediate aftermath of Leo's departure. Moving day was completely drama-filled, exactly as expected. Mom showed up with a massive 26-foot U-Haul truck way bigger than necessary for Leo's meager possessions and spent the entire 4 hours making loud, passive-aggressive comments about how some people forget where they came from, and how blood is supposed to be thicker than water. Leo, for his part, was sullen, moody, and barely spoke a word to me. As he was carrying his gaming chair out to the truck, he did manage to mutter something under his breath about how I would deeply regret this when I needed his help someday. I just smiled, handed him a box of his anime posters, and helped him load his stuff anyway, because despite everything, I still wanted him out as fast as possible. The first few weeks after he left were nothing short of blissful. I deep cleaned my entire house from top to bottom, shampooed the carpets to get the smell of his friend's cheap beer out, reorganized everything, and finally felt like I could actually breathe and relax in my own home. I even converted the guest room he was in into a beautiful home office, complete with a massive oak desk and bookshelves, which I had been wanting to do for ages. Mom maintained complete radio silence for about 3 weeks. Then, the texts started trickling in. First, they were subtle and probing. Hope you're doing well. The big house must feel so empty and lonely. Your brother really misses you. I responded politely, but employed the gray rock method, not engaging beyond basic pleasantries. Then, about 6 weeks after Leo moved out, Mom called me with massive news. Leo had apparently been absolutely thriving in his new environment. He had gotten a part-time job at a local tech repair and gaming store, and was really finding his footing. She gushed for 20 minutes about how incredibly proud she was and how the move had been exactly the push he needed to mature. I was genuinely, truly happy for Leo. Maybe hitting rock bottom and being forced to pay his own rent was the exact wake-up call he needed to start adulting. I told Mom I was thrilled he was doing well, and foolishly thought that would be the end of the drama. 2 weeks later, she invited me to Sunday dinner at her condo. I hadn't seen her in person since moving day, and despite all the insane toxicity, I missed our family dinners, so I cautiously agreed to go. Dinner actually started out incredibly pleasant. She made pot roast, Dad's old favorite. Leo was there, and he actually looked genuinely good. He had cut his messy hair, seemed to have way more energy, and even made normal, polite small talk about his new coworkers and his job. I started to relax my shoulders, thinking maybe, just maybe, we could move past all the police drama and be a normal family again. Then, over the cherry pie dessert, Mom dropped her nuclear bomb. So, Mark, she started, using that specific, sickly sweet tone that immediately put my nervous system on high alert. I have been thinking a lot about your living situation. My living situation? I asked, setting my fork down. I own a house. What is there to think about? She smiled, clasping her hands together. You know, Leo is doing so incredibly well now. He is really growing into a mature, responsible young man. And his current living situation is adequate, but it's just not ideal for someone in such a crucial career development phase. I knew exactly where this was going, but I let her continue, morbidly curious about the sheer mental gymnastics she was about to perform. The room he is renting is very small, and sharing a single bathroom with 3 other loud boys isn't conducive to the professional image he needs to maintain for his new job. Plus, that neighborhood isn't the best, and as a mother, I worry constantly about his safety. Leo, I noticed, was suddenly very deeply interested in his slice of pie, refusing to make eye contact with anyone at the table. Mom took a deep breath, her eyes shining with delusion. I think it would be absolutely best for everyone if Leo moved back in with you permanently. He has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he can be responsible now, and family should always support each other's upward trajectory. You have all that space. I almost laughed right then and there. The audacity was absolutely breathtaking. But wait, it gets so much better. And, she continued, raising a finger, since Leo is a working professional now and actively contributing to society, it only makes logical sense that he should have the master bedroom. You could easily take the smaller guest room. After all, you are rarely home with your busy work schedule anyway. Leo needs a proper, expansive space to rest after his grueling shifts and to maintain his streaming setup, which could easily become a lucrative second income source for him. She actually sat there and presented this as if it were a perfectly reasonable, logical business proposal. As if the last 4 months of screaming matches, broken locks, and police visits hadn't even happened. As if Leo paying his own rent somewhere else for a mere 6 weeks somehow erased a lifetime of entitlement and automatically earned him the deed to my master bedroom. Besides, she added, delivering what she clearly thought was the ultimate checkmate. Mature adults adapt to family needs. Young people need extreme stability during their formative years. You are well established in your career. Leo is just starting out. The responsible, loving thing would be to support him. I sat there in silence for a long moment, genuinely stunned by the absolute absurdity on display. I looked at her earnest face, then at Leo, who was practically trying to merge with his chair. Then, I started laughing. Not a polite, uncomfortable chuckle, but real, deep, belly laughter. The kind of laughter that makes your stomach physically hurt and brings tears to your eyes. Mom looked deeply offended. Her face flushed red. I don't see what is so funny about supporting your family, Mark. That is when I lost it. Not in rage or anger this time, but in pure, exhausted, unfiltered honesty. Mom, I said, wiping a tear from my eye. Do you hear yourself? Do you genuinely, truly not see how completely insane you sound? Leo is an adult. He is not 12 years old. Millions of 20-year-olds manage to live in small rooms and share bathrooms without their entire lives falling apart. I did it. You did it when you were young. Dad did it. Everyone does it. It's called being an adult. I turned my gaze to my brother. And you? Are you seriously sitting here silently listening to this? Are you not deeply embarrassed? You have a job now, which is fantastic, and I am genuinely proud of you for that. But working at a cash register for 6 weeks does not mean you get a golden ticket to upgrade to the master bedroom in a house that I bought and pay for. Leo finally looked up, his face burning red. I didn't ask her to say this. He mumbled defensively. But you didn't stop her either, I pointed out sharply. Which tells me you were sitting there, hoping I would cave to the pressure. Mom tried to interject, her voice rising in pitch, but I held up a hand. I wasn't done. You know what? I am completely tired of this. I am exhausted from being treated like my only value to this family is what financial resources I can provide. My house is not a spiritual retreat center for Leo to find himself. 5. My bedroom is not a shiny prize to be awarded to whoever you think needs it most this week. And my life, my comfort, and my boundaries are not less important just because I have my shit together and don't cry when things get hard. I stood up, threw my napkin on the table, and grabbed my jacket. Mom immediately started crying, the crocodile tears flowing instantly, screaming that I was tearing the family apart and breaking her heart. But for the very first time in my entire life, her tears had absolutely zero effect on me. I felt nothing but pity. No, Mom, I said calmly, looking down at her. You are tearing the family apart by constantly demanding I sacrifice my life for Leo. By teaching him that he is entitled to whatever he wants if he just waits long enough or makes others feel guilty enough. I love you both, but I am entirely done participating in this toxic dynamic. I walked out the front door. The cool night air hit my face, and I swear to God, it felt amazing. I felt 10 pounds lighter. That was a month ago. Since then, I have had minimal, strictly necessary contact with both of them. Leo actually texted me a week later, offering a genuine apology. He said he didn't know Mom was going to ambush me like that at dinner. I believe him, partly. I think he casually mentioned to Mom that he hated sharing a bathroom with his roommates, and her twisted brain ran with it and concocted the master bedroom scheme. But he also didn't exactly discourage her when she was pitching it. Mom has predictably cycled through every single manipulation tactic in the narcissist playbook. She has tried guilt. I am getting older and my health is failing. I just want my boys to get along. She has tried anger. You are a selfish, greedy pig and you will die completely alone. She has deployed flying monkeys. Various distant aunts and uncles have blown up my phone to tell me I should be the bigger person. She even tried blatant bribery, offering to pay for an all-expenses-paid family vacation to Hawaii if I would just stop being so stubborn and let Leo move in. I have stayed incredibly firm. I block the flying monkeys. I ignore the guilt trips. I see my therapist every single Tuesday, and she has helped me profoundly understand that this isn't about a bedroom, or even really about Leo. It is about a fundamental, deep-seated lack of respect for my boundaries and my autonomy as a human being. It is about being viewed purely as a resource and a safety net, rather than a person with my own needs. But here is the ultimate plot twist that makes this whole ordeal worth it. Last week, Aunt Sarah called me with a massive update. Apparently, Leo has been doing incredibly well, actually, legitimately well. He got promoted to assistant shift manager at the gaming store. He is saving his money, and he is even talking about enrolling in community college part-time next semester to study IT. And here is the absolute kicker. He told Aunt Sarah in private that me forcing him to move out was the single best thing that ever happened to him because it finally forced him to grow up and face the real world. He has apparently even started aggressively pushing back against mom's incessant babying, telling her to stop calling his boss to check on him and that he can handle his own life. Mom, predictably, is absolutely losing her mind over this. She is not handling his newfound independence well at all. She has been crying to anyone who will listen that both of her sons have cruelly abandoned her and that she suffers from empty nest syndrome. She built her entire identity around being Leo's savior, and now that he doesn't need saving, she doesn't know what to do with herself. As for me, I am doing absolutely fantastic. My house is a peaceful sanctuary. My office is set up exactly how I want it, I am killing it at work, and I am sleeping soundly in my beautiful master bedroom every single night. I have even started dating a really wonderful woman, and it is incredibly nice being able to bring her over for dinner without constantly worrying about my brother's mess or my mother's screaming matches. I have learned a massive amount from this horrible experience. Mainly, I learned that family first does not mean family only, and it certainly does not mean family at the cost of your own sanity. Sometimes, the absolute most loving, caring thing you can possibly do for a person is to establish firm boundaries and stick to them, even when it is incredibly hard, even when people cry, scream, and call you a selfish monster. Even when you are painted as the villain in their twisted story. Leo and I might rebuild our relationship someday. I genuinely hope we do, but when we do, it will be on equal terms, as two independent adults, who respect each other's boundaries and property. As for Mom, that is a much longer, darker road. She needs to fundamentally understand that her children are separate individuals with their own lives, not just extensions of her will and property to be managed. I am not holding my breath for an apology, but I am open to the possibility of low contact in the distant future. Thank you Reddit, for being with me through this insane journey. Your support, tough love, and outside perspective helped me see clearly when I was deeply lost in the thick fog of family manipulation. For anyone out there dealing with similar golden child, scapegoat situations, remember, you are not crazy, you are not selfish, and you absolutely deserve safety and respect in your own home. This is my final update. I am permanently closing this chaotic chapter and moving forward with my life. And yes, I am doing it happily from the comfort of my master bedroom. Edit 2. Since a few people asked in the recent comments, yes, I still have the heavy-duty deadbolt locks on my bedroom door. No, I am never giving anyone else a spare key. And yes, I have made it abundantly clear to any future roommates or partners that my boundaries regarding my personal space are completely non-negotiable. Fool me once, shame on you. Try to steal my bedroom twice, you get evicted. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out and allows us to bring you even more awesome stories. Thank you so much for watching.
I testified against my war hero dad, while my brother's blood sugar monitors still beeped in court. The truth broke him before the verdict did. I was 13 when Dad abandoned me and my younger sister at his mother's place. He was leaving for Iraq for 9 months, and she was an alcoholic who had beaten us. The worst part was how, just 3 weeks ago, he fought tooth and claw to gain custody and separate us from Mom. The first week was hellish. Grandma would pass out on the couch by 4 p.m., leaving us to fend for ourselves. Luca had type 1 diabetes and needed insulin at 7 p.m., but Grandma was too drunk to remember. I attempted to help, but I was a youngster and had no idea what I was doing. Luca started getting sick more frequently. He'd throw up and become dizzy, but Grandma would simply urge him to quit being dramatic. We started arriving at school looking like garbage. Our clothes were soiled, and we were usually hungry since Grandma spent her money on whiskey, rather than groceries. I made excuses for her when teachers inquired about our appearance. The real trouble occurred when the neighbors saw. They'd notice us outside at odd hours, searching for food in their garbage cans. I remember knocking on one of their doors in the middle of the night and asking if they had any cold leftovers that they weren't going to eat. When the woman heard me, she seemed really sorrowful. "Where is your grandmother, sweetheart?" she questioned me. "She is sleeping. She sleeps a lot because she works so much," I explained. I was becoming better at lying. The neighbor woman began leaving sandwiches on our porch. Other neighbors did as well. And before I knew it, she had contacted Child Protective Services for us. A woman named Amelia Ward arrived to investigate. She seemed polite at first, asking us a lot of questions about Grandma. I wanted to tell her everything, but I was afraid of what Dad would do if he discovered we snitched. "Is your grandmother taking good care of you?" Amy asked. I looked at Luca, who was pale and wobbly from not taking his morning insulin. Yeah, she takes good care of us, I'd said. But Amelia could tell we were starved and filthy. She took notes and indicated she would return to check on us. I hoped things would finally change. But then Dad came home on emergency leave after Amelia contacted him. He arrived in his full combat outfit, looking authoritative and frightening. Amelia was there waiting to speak with him, and I could tell she was nervous. Sir, I've received some concerning reports about the children's care, she told me. Dad shut her off instantly. Ma'am, with all due respect, I have served 4 tours in Iraq defending our country. I believe I understand how to choose proper care for my children. My mother reared me, and I turned out well. Amelia shifted uneasily. I understand your service, sir, but the neighbors have reported signs of neglect. Those neighbors are just anti-military liberals who don't like having a veteran's family in their neighborhood, my dad added. His voice became louder and more hostile. They're harassing my family while I'm overseas protecting their freedom. Amelia started to back down. She discussed her own son's deployment and the difficulties that military families face. Dad nodded as if they were great pals now. My mother is a member of our family, Dad said. She knows these kids better than some of our stranger neighbors. I trust her completely, and frankly I'm offended that people are trying to attack a veteran's family. Amelia apologized and stated she would not pursue it further. She left, and Dad returned to Iraq the next day. He drew me aside before leaving. If you ever tell lies about Grandma again, you'll regret it, he told me. Grandma made me strong, and she will make you tough too. Stop being weak. Things got a lot worse after that. Grandma's drinking grew, and she began laying hands on us when we requested food or reminded her about Luca's insulin. The neighbors continued to try to help, but they felt powerless because CPS had ignored their worries. Luca was getting progressively ill. Then the worst thing happened. Dad went on another deployment, and Grandma missed Luca's insulin for 2 days. I watched my younger brother degrade hour after hour. He was frequently puking up and couldn't remain awake. His breathing became very shallow. Luca, you need to stay with me, I kept telling him, but he was drifting in and out of awareness. When he refused to wake up, I contacted 911. The paramedics took him to the hospital, where the doctor diagnosed diabetic ketoacidosis. They claimed he came close to death. A different social worker, Sophia Mueller, visited the hospital. She looked through Luca's medical records and noticed a pattern of missed insulin injections and mistreatment. She didn't care about Dad's military service or the fact that Grandma was family. This is medical neglect, and it's life-threatening, she stated to me. I'm filing an emergency petition with the judge today. She bypassed the local CPS office and went straight to family court. Before I knew it, Dad had been called, and he was back on a plane, ready to take me home. Dad's presence enveloped the hospital room like a storm cloud. He passed past Sophia without acknowledging her, his boots clicking on the linoleum floor. I saw him approach Luca's bed, where my younger brother was hooked up to monitors and IV drips. The devices beeped regularly, monitoring his heart rate and blood sugar levels, which the doctors were still attempting to normalize. What has happened to my son? Dad's voice had that deadly edge I knew all too well. He turned to face me, and my stomach dropped. His jaw was clenched, and I could see a muscle quivering beneath his skin. Sophia walked forward, clutching a big folder containing medical records. Mr. Callahan, your son nearly died of diabetic ketoacidosis. The hospital records indicate a trend of missed insulin injections over the last few weeks. Dad's eyes narrowed. He stiffened his shoulders, making himself appear even more imposing in his military fatigues. So, who exactly are you? My name is Sophia Miller, and I work as a social worker for the county. I've been appointed to look into this case of medical neglect. Medical neglect? Dad raised his voice slightly. My mother has been looking after these children while I serve our country. Any concerns about Luca's treatment are simply misconceptions. I squeezed against the wall, hoping to disappear. Sophia opened the folder and took out a few documents. Here are Luca's blood sugar diaries from past hospital trips. The pattern is clear. He'd been admitted 4 times in the previous month, all with dangerously high blood sugar levels. Dad grabbed the papers from her hands and swiftly scanned them. His expression darkened as he read each page. Where did you acquire this? They are part of Luca's medical record. Sophia stayed calm despite Dad's hostile demeanor. The door opened and a middle-aged woman entered, her graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. She glanced between Dad and Sophia before settling on Luca's chart. Mr. Hello, my name is Dr. Annika Novak. I have been treating your youngster. Dad quickly changed his approach. extended his hand with a practiced smile. "Doctor, thank you for taking care of my son. When can we take him home?" Dr. Novak did not reciprocate the smile. "Mr. Callahan, your son almost died. His blood sugar level was over 580 when he arrived. He had a diabetic coma. This amount of negligence may have resulted in death." "Neglect is a strong word, doctor." Dad's charm offensive continued. "My mother is elderly, and occasionally forgets things. I'll make sure she receives better reminders about his insulin schedule." Dr. Novak shook her head. "This extends beyond ordinary forgetfulness. Luca's A1C readings show that he has had poor blood sugar control for several months. He's terribly emaciated and appears dehydrated. These are signs of systemic neglect." I saw Dad's hands clench into fists at his sides. Sophia noticed as well and quickly positioned herself between Dad and the doctor. "Mr. Callahan, we need to talk about alternative care arrangements for your children." "What about alternative arrangements?" Dad's voice lowered to a low growl. "These are my kids. I decide what is best for them." "The court will make that decision," Sophia stated firmly. "I have already filed an emergency petition. There is a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning." Dad's face became red. He made a step toward Sophia, and I immediately shifted closer to Luca's bed. "You have no rights. I serve this country by protecting people like you, and this is how you repay me?" Dr. Novak pushed a button on the wall. "Mr. Callahan, I'll have to ask you to lower your voice. This is the pediatric ward." Two security guards appeared at the doorway. Dad noticed them and took a deep breath, apparently attempting to suppress his fury. He turned back to Sophia. "This was a mistake. My mother raised me and my siblings properly. She is family. Family cares for family. Family doesn't let children nearly die from preventable medical emergencies," Sophia told me. "The evidence is clear. Your mother is incapable of providing adequate care." Dad stared at me, and I noticed a difference in his expression. It was calculating, almost predatory. "Son, tell them. Tell them how beautifully Grandma cares for you." My mouth became dry. I looked at Luca, who was still unconscious on the hospital bed, and at Sophia, who was watching me with concern. Dr. Novak walked closer to me, establishing a subtle barrier between Dad and where I was standing. My voice broke. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Grandma drinks a lot." The words hung in the air like a confession. Dad's face changed from crimson to purple. "Boy, you have no idea what you are saying. You're perplexed and scared." Sophia stepped forward. "Let him speak, Mr. Callahan." But I couldn't say anything more. My throat felt as though it was closing up. Dad's look pierced through me, and I knew there would be consequences later. There always was. Dad pulled the "I served my country" card faster than a magician with a rabbit, except that instead of solving problems, he's making everyone uncomfortable while his children are connected to more gadgets than a gaming setup. Dr. Novak interfered. "I believe we should give Luca a rest. Mr. Callahan, your visiting hours are about to end." "I'm not leaving my son," Dad stated flatly. "Actually, given the circumstances, I think it's best if the children have some space," Sophia told me. She took out her phone. "I can have security escort you out if necessary." Dad's jaw worked silently for a time, then he grinned, but not with his eyes. "Fine, I'll leave. But it's not over. I'll see you in court tomorrow and we'll see what the judge thinks of someone attempting to break up a military family." He approached the door, hesitated, and returned my gaze. "I'll be staying at Grandma's tonight. We have a lot to talk." After he went, my entire body began shaking. Sophia sat in the chair next to me and gently touched my shoulder. "You did the correct thing." "I know that was difficult." "He's going to call me," I said quietly. "No, he is not. You are not going back there tonight. I've arranged for an emergency placement. You will remain somewhere safe until the hearing." Dr. Novak checked Luca's monitors again. "He should awaken soon. His blood sugar is normalizing beautifully, but he will need ongoing care. No more missed dosages." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I attempted to help him. I truly did. But I didn't know how to use the insulin pen correctly, and Grandma would be upset if I touched her belongings. "None of this is your fault," Dr. Novak stated firmly. "You're 13 years old. You should not be liable for your brother's medical care." Sophia's phone vibrated. She examined it and grimaced. "Your father has phoned my supervisor." He claims I am discriminating against him because of his military service. Is it going to work? I inquired, fear creeping back in. No. The medical data is overwhelming, but he is going to fight this hard. She looked at me gravely. I need you to prepare for tomorrow. The judge will want to hear from you. I cannot testify against Dad. He will never forgive me. You will not be testifying against him. You will disclose the truth about what happened to Luca. There is a difference. But I knew Dad wouldn't view things that way. In his world, commitment to family meant being silent at all times. Breaking the code represented the ultimate treachery. A quiet groan emanated from the bed. Luca's eyes flickered open, unfocused and perplexed. Where am I? I jumped up and took his hand. You are in the hospital. You got terribly sick. But you'll be okay. He took a careful glance around at the machinery and IV lines. My head hurts. Dr. Novak walked to his side and examined his pupils with a little light. That is normal, Luca. You've been really unwell, but you're improving now. Where is Grandma? He asked. Sophia and I exchanged looks. She's at home, I explained cautiously. Good. Luca muttered. She was really mad about something. I don't remember what. Sophia wrote another note in her file. Every detail mattered now, as we built the argument that would define our future. I sat back down, still holding Luca's hand, and tried not to think about what Dad was doing at Grandma's place, probably coaching her on what to say and ensuring their stories were consistent. Sophia organized an emergency placement at a foster family approximately 30 minutes from the hospital. The family appeared pleasant enough. The Harrisons, an older couple, lived in a quiet house that smelled like vanilla candles. They led me to a small bedroom that contained a twin bed and a desk. The bathroom is down the hall, Mrs. Harrison murmured softly. There are clean towels in the closet. Are you hungry? I shook my head, despite the fact that I had not eaten anything all day. My stomach was too twisted from anxiousness to handle meals. After they went, I sat on the side of the bed staring at my hands. They still shook slightly. I could not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's face in the hospital room. How his expression changed from charm to wrath and back again. I knew he was plotting something. He always had a plan. The next morning, Mrs. Harrison drove me to the courthouse. The structure was old and frightening, with massive columns and large wooden doors. Sophia greeted us in the lobby, holding a heavy briefcase. How is Luca? I inquired instantly. He's doing well. Still in the hospital but improving. Dr. Novak will testify via phone about his condition. She guided us through security and down a lengthy hallway. The hearing is in family court. It's less formal than regular court, but you have to speak the truth. We entered a small courtroom with wood paneling and fluorescent lighting. Dad was already present, sitting at a table with a man in a suit who must have been his lawyer. Grandma sat behind them in the gallery, dressed for church and looking more sober than I had seen her in months. Dad had also cleaned up. His uniform was neatly pressed, and he had shaved thoroughly. He appeared to be the ideal soldier, the type of person you'd trust with everything. He did not glance at me when we sat at the opposite table. The judge entered, an elderly woman with short gray hair and glasses perched above her nose. She read the documents in front of her before gazing up into the courtroom. This is an emergency hearing for custody of 2 small children. I have studied both the petition and the medical records. Let us start with the social worker's report. Sophia rose and began presenting the evidence. She was meticulous and clinical, outlining the history of neglect, including missing insulin injections and several hospitalizations. She showed us images of our living conditions at Grandma's house, including the empty refrigerator and the bottles stashed throughout the rooms. Dad's lawyer objected multiple times, claiming that the images were taken without permission, that the medical records were being misconstrued, and that this was a deliberate attack on a military family. The judge overruled most of his concerns while allowing him to present his arguments. When it was time for Dad to speak, he transformed. The irate man from the hospital was no longer among us. In his place stood a dedicated father, exhausted from war service, doing his best in hard circumstances. Your Honor, I have served 4 deployments in Iraq. I have given everything for my country and my children. When their mother proved inadequate, I battled for custody to provide them with stability. I trusted my mother to care for them while I served our country. He went on to discuss the difficulties that military families face, the absence of support structures, and the judgment of civilians who do not comprehend sacrifice. Several times he cited his medals, commendations, and impeccable service record. Grandma testified next, and I barely recognized her. She expressed her love for us openly, stating that she had done her best despite her age and health concerns. She agreed to being forgetful on occasion, but denied frequent drinking. She said the bottles in the images were old and from before we moved in. Then it was my turn. My legs felt like jello as I approached the witness stand. The judge smiled at me warmly. "Tell the truth, son. That's all we need." Dad's lawyer began with simple inquiries about my name, age, and how long I had lived with Grandma. Then he got to the hard part. "Did your grandmother ever abuse you?" I looked at Dad. Although his countenance was neutral, I could see the caution in his eyes. "Sometimes she gets upset." That wasn't what I requested. "Has she ever physically harmed you?" My hands clutched the edge of the witness box. "Yes." "Could you be more specific?" I detailed some of the occurrences as calmly as I could. The lawyer attempted to reduce each one, implying that I was exaggerating or misremembering. But Sophia had prepared me for this, so I adhered to the truth. "How about your father? How is he treating you?" This was a minefield. I chose my words carefully. "He has high expectations." "Does he love you?" "Yes." "Does he want the best for you?" I paused. The judge leant forward slightly. "You can take your time." "He wants us to be strong," I finally explained. "He thinks Grandma's house makes us strong." The lawyer pressed on. But I had found my beat. I responded frankly but cautiously, attempting to construct a picture without openly accusing Dad of anything that might elicit retaliation. Dr. Novak's testimony was later delivered via telephone in the courtroom. She was forthright about Luca's condition and the extent of the mistreatment. She used medical words that I didn't understand, but her conclusion was clear. Luca could have died, and would die if put back in the same position. The judge questioned Dad directly about the medical neglect. He had an answer to everything. Grandma was becoming old and needed help remembering. He had attempted to establish support services, but the military bureaucracy was slow. He had no idea how awful things had gotten because no one had informed him. "Your son tried to tell a social worker weeks ago," the judge said. "Your Honor, children sometimes exaggerate to get attention. They have had a difficult time during my deployment. They are acting out." The hearing lasted for hours. Each side provided evidence, made arguments, and pointed fingers. Throughout it all, I observed Dad execute. He was skilled at moving between devoted father, wounded veteran, and victim of an unfair system when necessary. Finally, the judge asked for a recess to make her ruling. We waited in the hallway, Sophia talking quietly on the phone with her supervisor, Dad and his lawyer scheming in a corner, and Grandma sitting on a seat, looking older and more vulnerable than normal. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge appeared serious. "It's a tricky case. On the one side we have a man serving his nation while trying to provide for his children in difficult circumstances. On the other side, we have compelling medical proof of life-threatening neglect." She continued, stating the facts as she saw them. My heart beat as she approached her decision. "The court finds that returning the children to their grandmother's care would pose an immediate risk to their health and safety." The judge was creating tension as if she were holding a reality show finale, but Luca's life was on the line. Now that's what I call courtroom drama with bad timing. Someone needed to inform her that this wasn't Europe's got custody. Temporary custody is granted to the Department of Children's Services pending a full investigation and permanent custody hearing. Dad shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is incorrect. These are my kids." "Sit down, Mr. Callahan, or I'll hold you in contempt." The judge's voice was steely. "You'll be able to provide a complete plan for their care during the permanent hearing. Until then, kids will remain in foster care." She scheduled the next hearing for 4 months out, giving Dad time to make plans that did not involve Grandma. As we left the courthouse, Dad grabbed my arm. "This isn't over," he stated gently. "You are still my son. Remember that." Sophia intervened and led me away, but I could feel his gaze on my back as we walked down the corridor. I knew he was already plotting his next move. Dad always had a plan. The drive back to the Harrisons' house seemed unreal. Mrs. Harrison continued looking at me in the rearview mirror, her eyes filled with anxiety. I peered out the window, seeing familiar streets pass by, knowing Dad was somewhere out there, planning his next move. Back at the foster home, I attempted to eat the sandwich Mrs. Harrison prepared, but my hands trembled. Every car passing outside made me jump. I knew Dad's strategy. He'd start small, probing boundaries and discovering flaws. The first sign appeared that evening. Mr. Harrison responded to a knock at the door, and I heard Dad's voice, calm and sensible. My blood turned icy. I crept to the top of the stairs, listening as Dad stated that he only wanted to check on his son and make sure I was comfortable. Mr. Harrison respectfully but firmly informed him that visits were to be arranged through Sophia. Dad thanked him for taking care of me, his voice tinged with false gratitude. After he went, Mrs. Harrison discovered me hunched on the steps. She assisted me back to my room and perched on the edge of the bed. I told her about Dad's methods. He'd charm them first, making them believe he was sensible. She listened intently and swore they'd be careful. The next morning, Sophia called. Dad had filed a complaint with her boss, alleging she had broken protocol and had a particular grudge against military families. He had also called the foster care licensing board, accusing the Harrisons of poisoning me against him. Sophia told me that these tactics would not work, but I could sense the strain in her voice. At the hospital, Luca was improving. The nurses allowed me to sit with him as he ate his first solid meal in days. He inquired about Grandma again, and I informed him that she was ill and couldn't visit. It was not wholly a falsehood. Dr. Novak taught me how to correctly administer insulin, something I had anxiously attempted to figure out on my own at Grandma's place. The situation became more serious on the second day. Dad arrived at the hospital during my visit with Luca. He entered wearing his formal uniform, medals sparkling. The nurses nearly swooned. He brought Luca a teddy bear and me a book about military heroes. He acted like the ideal father, inquiring about Luca's care and lavishly thanking the nurses for their efforts. He pulled me aside near the vending machines. His grasp on my shoulder appeared kind to anyone observing, but his fingers pushed in deep. He spoke quietly about family loyalty, disappointment, and how much easier things could have been if I had just revealed the truth. When Sophia arrived for her regular visit, Dad was sitting by Luca's bed, reading him a story, the epitome of fatherly devotion. That night, the Harrisons got several phone calls. The first couple were hang-ups. Then came calls from Dad's military buddies, who explained what a terrific man he was, and how everything was a misunderstanding. One caller claimed the Harrisons didn't understand military families, and were being exploited by a disgruntled youngster. The psychological assault intensified throughout the next week. Dad filed a formal complaint with the military, alleging Sophia harassed him and interfered with his service. He launched a social media campaign, sharing photographs of himself in uniform, along with carefully phrased words about fighting for his children and defending his nation. Comments rushed in to support the loyal soldier parent who is being persecuted by the system. Military recruiters suddenly became highly interested in visiting my classrooms at the school I'd started attending after leaving the foster family. They'd share stories about honor, devotion, and family values. One person expressed how painful it was when children deceived their parents. The message was plain. Dad began showing up everywhere, maintaining a legal distance yet making his presence felt. He'd be in the grocery store when Mrs. Harrison took me there. He would drive by the school during recess. He'd sit in the hospital cafeteria during my visits with Luca, reading a newspaper and never approaching, but always watching. Everyone was feeling the pressure. The Harrisons began receiving bad feedback on their foster care profile from unknown sources. Sophia's supervisor summoned her to many meetings to discuss the allegations. Even Dr. Novak admitted that someone had questioned her medical license, implying that she was misrepresenting Luca's health. 2 weeks before the permanent custody court, Dad made his most daring move. He scheduled an interview with a local TV station about the issues that military families face. He sat in his apartment, surrounded by images of us and his military honors, speaking eloquently about the sacrifices he had made and how the system failed veterans. He never brought up the mistreatment or Luca's near-death experience. Instead, he portrayed a picture of a loyal father who was punished for serving his nation. The interview aired in prime time. Within hours, Sophia's office was inundated with calls supporting Dad. The Harrisons began receiving comments on their car windshield calling them unpatriotic. Someone spray-painted, "Support our troops" on their garage door. I felt the walls close in. Dad was winning the public relations battle. He had transformed us into symbols, me as the ungrateful child and himself as the tormented hero. Sophia warned me that he was preparing a case claiming the entire system was prejudiced against him. Luca was hospitalized for a longer period of time than predicted. His blood sugar levels spiked anytime he became agitated, which happened every time Dad visited. Dr. Novak chronicled everything, noting that Luca's uneasiness appeared to be directly tied to his father's presence. Dad responded by calling in a private specialist, who stated that Luca's health was worsened by the trauma of being removed from his family. The foster home became a pressure cooker. Mr. Harrison began having problems at work after someone called and suggested he was hiding a child who had been trained to lie about a war hero. Mrs. Harrison discovered her automobile tires slashed one morning. They never said anything to me, but I could see the pressure on their faces. Dad's lawyer filed several letters asking increased visitation, psychiatric testing to prove I was coached, and speedy custody return. Each letter was forwarded to Sophia's managers, the judge, and several military advocacy organizations. The lawyer described a pattern of systemic prejudice against a decorated veteran. 3 weeks into foster care, I made a life-changing decision. I began keeping a journal, writing down all I remembered about living at Grandma's place. I wrote about finding empty insulin bottles beneath couch cushions, trying to wake Grandma to rescue Luca, and hiding injuries with long sleeves. I provided dates, timings, and particular instances. It was unpleasant to recall, but I knew memories could be questioned. Written documents were more difficult to ignore. Sophia assisted me in submitting the journal to the court, but Dad's lawyer instantly questioned its validity. He claimed that I had been trained to write it, and that the timing was suspect. He ordered handwriting analysis and psychological tests to see if I was being controlled. The psychiatric evaluation was exhausting. The court-appointed psychologist questioned me about my relationships with my father, grandmother, and mother. Dad had prepared well for this, having already submitted his own psychiatric evaluation from a military psychiatrist who confirmed his mental fitness and commitment to his children. During my review, I sought to balance truth and self-preservation. I knew Dad would read every word in the report. I had to be honest enough to protect Luca, while yet being cautious enough not to provoke Dad's worst retribution. The psychologist observed my hypervigilance, desire to dismiss unfavorable events, and protective instincts around Luca. She stated that these were consistent with a child who had taken on adult responsibilities too soon. Dad's lawyer framed this as evidence of coaching, claiming Sophia had trained me to exhibit these symptoms. Meanwhile, Luca's illness became the main battleground. Dad called in medical experts, who testified that diabetes treatment can be difficult for older caregivers, and that missed doses are not inherently neglectful. They claimed that Luca's health had been exacerbated by the stress of being apart from his family. Dr. Novak fought back using real data. She exhibited Luca's blood sugar logs, which revealed a clear pattern of worsening under Grandma's care versus improvement at the hospital. She described how near Luca had been to death and how diabetic ketoacidosis could result in lifelong organ damage. However, Dad's experts contended that the hospital setting alone could explain for the improvement. The community pressure increased. A veterans advocacy group launched a petition demanding Dad's complete custody. They staged rallies outside the courts, waving national flags and holding posters advocating for military families. Luca's blood sugar spikes every time Dad paid a visit were his body's way of submitting its own custody complaint. I guess even diabetes understands when to take a side in this mess. Local politicians began to weigh in, taking care not to appear anti-veteran. One especially horrible night, someone threw a rock through the Harrisons' glass. A message was attached, describing them as traitors who were ruining a military family. The police arrived, took a complaint, but indicated they couldn't do much because there were no witnesses. I overheard Mr. Harrison discussing with his wife whether they could continue fostering me. Dad stepped up his effort by reaching out to military media sites. He conducted interviews regarding the unique issues that deployed parents face, as well as how the system fails to recognize military culture. He spoke movingly about missing birthdays and holidays while serving overseas, and how all he wanted was to be home with his children. The story was shifting. Instead of a parent who had put his children at danger, Dad had become a symbol of how the country had failed its veterans. Online forums erupted with support for him. People who had never met us had strong views about our family. Sophia was overwhelmed with papers and complaints. Her supervisor tasked another employee with reviewing her handling of the situation. Dad's counsel said Sophia had a bias against military families, citing a case from years ago in which she removed children from another veteran's house. At school, I felt alienated. My father's identity had circulated, and children either avoided me or accused me of being anti-patriotic. Teachers regarded me with pity or distrust. One replacement instructor made a harsh remark about children who did not value their parents' contributions. The Harrisons attempted to protect me, but I could see them cracking. They had fostered scores of children over the years, but they had never experienced this amount of persecution. Mrs. Harrison started experiencing panic attacks. Mr. Harrison installed security cameras after finding their garbage cans overturned several times. 6 weeks into foster care, Dad pulled out his ace. He announced his retirement from the service in order to devote more time to his children. He gave a press conference in the Veterans Hall, accompanied by other warriors. He discussed prioritizing his children over his career, the greatest sacrifice for a soldier. He brought a job offer from a local security agency, demonstrating his ability to give stable employment. This altered the entire dynamic. The main reason for keeping us in foster care was Dad's deployments. Now, he was erasing that barrier. portraying himself as a parent who had sacrificed all for his children. The veterans community rallied even more strongly around him. Luca was finally moved from the hospital to a specialized medical foster home. Dad's lawyer argued that my presence might encourage Luca to say terrible things about their father, so I was only allowed supervised visits from now on. Luca appeared bewildered and introverted throughout our few visits. He kept asking when we could go home, even though he couldn't explain where home was anymore. The permanent custody hearing loomed like a storm. Dad's attorney filed petition after motion, requesting access to all medical records, every correspondence between Sophia and her superiors, and any notes from foster families. He was arguing that the entire system was conspiring against a military hero. Sophia worked frantically to counter every action. She obtained affidavits from neighbors who had witnessed the mistreatment, collated Luca's complete medical history, and documented Dad's pattern of manipulation and intimidation. However, for every piece of evidence Sophia offered, Dad's team provided a counter-narrative. The weekend before the hearing, Dad made one last effort. He planned a candlelight vigil outside the courthouse, billed as a prayer meeting for separated military families. Hundreds of people attended. The local media reported it extensively. He talked about forgiveness, healing, and bringing his family back together. He even urged that he seek counseling to be a better father. I felt terrible as I watched the news report from the Harrisons' living room. Dad had successfully changed the narrative from one of kid endangerment to one of government overreach. He had weaponized his military experience, using public opinion as a shield. Mrs. Harrison sat alongside me with her hand on my shoulder. She assured me that the truth would eventually come out, and that the judge would see through the trickery. But I could sense doubt in her eyes. We all understood how powerful Dad's story had become. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Luca, and how many more times his blood sugar would drop if we went back. I thought of Grandma, who had been fairly silent throughout, most likely because Dad had taught her to maintain her image. Sophia called early in the morning with updates. Dad had filed letters of support from dozens of military men, community leaders, and even a state senator. He had completed a parenting class and received certificates to show it. He'd scheduled Luca's future medical appointments with a reputable endocrinologist. On paper, he appeared to be a rehabilitated father who had done everything well. As Mrs. Harrison drove me to the courthouse, I noticed the masses already gathered. Veterans in uniform, family waving flags, and news vans lined the roadway. Dad had turned the custody hearing into a political event. Inside the courthouse, the mood was tight. The small courtroom was filled with Dad's supporters. They donned yellow ribbons and military pins. When Dad entered in his dress uniform, they stood in admiration. He'd planned every aspect properly. Sophia squeezed my hand while we took our seats. She warned me that this would be difficult, and that Dad would pull out all the stops. But seeing the entire scope of his effort was astounding. He'd transformed public opinion into a weapon, and he was using it against everybody who stood in his way. The judge appeared, and I could see her looking around the filled courtroom with concern. She reminded everyone that this was about the well-being of two children, not politics or public opinion. But I pondered how she could possibly disregard Dad's insistence. As the hearing began, I figured Dad had one more surprise in store. But it would be revealed soon enough. For the time being, I sat between Sophia and Mrs. Harrison, trying to keep my breathing calm, knowing that everything we'd fought for over the previous 2 months was about to be decided. The real war has barely begun. The judge summoned Dad's surprise witness to the stand. A man in military dress blues moved forward, his chest adorned with ribbons and medals. He identified himself as Colonel Peter Holm, Dad's previous commanding officer. My heart dropped as he continued to describe Dad's exceptional service record, including his leadership under fire and loyalty to his unit. Colonel Holm portrayed Dad as a hero who rescued lives in combat and gave everything for his country. He talked on the psychological impact of deployment and how soldiers struggled to return to normal life. He indicated that Dad's parenting failures were symptoms of his service, rather than character faults. Sophia opposed, stating that military service did not excuse child irresponsibility. The court permitted the hearing to proceed while reminding everyone that the focus was on the children's safety, not Dad's military record. Dad's lawyer then called several character witnesses. Fellow servicemen spoke of Dad's honesty. His landlord referred to him as a model renter. His new boss at the security firm commended his work ethic and dependability. Each testimony supported the story of a fine man being unfairly victimized. When Sophia's turn came to offer rebuttal evidence, she concentrated on medical facts. She presented Luca's complete hospital records, which revealed not only the latest crisis, but also a pattern of emergency room visits dating back months. She showed photos of Luca taken at each admittance, demonstrating his rapid deterioration under Grandma's care. The most devastating proof arrived from an unexpected source. A nurse from Luca's previous hospital trips had taken personal notes on our health. She documented bruising, starvation, and Luca's recurrent complaints about being hungry and missing his insulin. Her notes predate any custody dispute, which makes them more difficult to reject as prejudiced. Dad's lawyer questioned the nurse's integrity, claiming she had violated patient privacy by making personal notes. He claimed that her observations were subjective and unprofessional. But the harm had been done. An impartial third party had documented the pattern of neglect, which was shown to the judge. Dr. Novak testified again, but this time in person. She presented Luca's blood test results, describing in detail how persistent high blood sugar levels affected organs. She exhibited brain scans that revealed early signs of diabetes-related impairment. She stated unequivocally that transferring Luca to an environment in which his medical needs were disregarded would most certainly result in irreversible disability or death. Dad's medical expert attempted to downplay the findings, claiming that the harm was reversible with careful treatment. He highlighted that Dad had already planned for Luca to receive good medical treatment in the future. Dr. Novak, on the other hand, provided statistics on diabetic youngsters who had experienced ketoacidosis on multiple occasions. The fatality numbers were dismal. The court then heard from the court-appointed child advocate, Mrs. Elise Laurent, who had been designated to represent Luca's interests. She had interviewed Luca several times and observed how he interacted with other family members. Her report was detrimental to Dad's case. Mrs. Laurent described Luca's fear responses when his father's name was spoken. She documented how Luca's blood sugar levels rose during Dad's hospital stays. She had witnessed Luca having nightmares about returning to Grandma's place. Most crucially, she had recorded Luca stating that he felt protected for the first time at the medical foster home. Dad's composure finally broke. He stood up, defying his lawyer's attempts to stop him, and confronted the judge directly. Colonel Holm had trotted out the complete military resume as if it were a free pass from child endangerment charges. Because nothing says good parenting like listing your military medals while your child's brain scans show evidence of medical negligence. He discussed the difficulty of command, specifically making life or death decisions in war. He maintained that while his methods may appear harsh to bystanders, they were intended to produce strong, robust youngsters capable of surviving in a hostile world. The judge had to threaten Dad with contempt charges to get him to sit down. His outburst had harmed his carefully cultivated image. Some of his followers in the gallery appeared uneasy. The loyal father's mask had slipped, revealing the domineering soldier underneath. Sophia summoned her final witness, me. I walked to the witness stand on trembling knees, knowing that this was my last chance to safeguard Luca. Dad's lawyer instantly protested, claiming I had previously testified. The judge overruled him, noting that fresh evidence had been offered, which I could address. Sophia questioned me about the journal I had kept. I mentioned how I began documenting things after understanding that my memory may be challenged. I revealed specific instances, such as discovering Luca unconscious on the bathroom floor, Grandma being too drunk to wake up when I shouted for help, and attempting to contact 911, only to have Grandma pull the phone from the wall. When I begged for aid, my father called from Iraq and told me to handle it like a man. Dad's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively. He implied that I'd been taught to write the journal, and Sophia had directed me what to include. He pointed out irregularities in dates, hinting that I was lying. He questioned why I hadn't informed teachers or other adults if things were indeed that horrible. I detailed Dad's threats and how he convinced me that foster care would be worse than Grandma's place. I shared my dread of being removed from Luca and being blamed for splitting up our family. I discussed trying to safeguard Luca myself because I didn't trust anyone else to do so. The lawyer pressed harder, attempting to persuade me that I had exaggerated or lied, but I had the truth on my side. Every incident I mentioned was authentic and vividly remembered. When he argued that I was exaggerating Luca's health, I detailed how my little brother's lips turned blue, his breathing became shallow, and I thought he was dying in my arms. The judge eventually interfered, asking the lawyer to move on, but I could tell she was moved by my evidence. Several others in the gallery were wiping away tears, even some of Dad's fans. During a brief recess, I overheard angry conversations in the corridor. Some of Dad's veteran pals were bickering amongst themselves. The story was fracturing. Supporting a fellow soldier was one thing. Endangering children was another. The medical data was too compelling to ignore. When we reconvened, Dad's lawyer delivered his closing argument. He admitted that mistakes had been made, but contended that they were fixable. He stressed Dad's military service, sacrifice, and determination to improve. He portrayed an image of a family that could heal if given the opportunity. Sophia's conclusion was logical and factual. She described the history of neglect, the rising medical crises, and the pattern of manipulation and intimidation. She claimed that Dad had consistently prioritized his image over his children's safety. She requested that the judge examine what would happen the next time Luca's blood sugar dropped if we were restored to Dad's care. The judge said that she will make her decision following a brief recess. Those 30 minutes seemed like hours. I sat between Sophia and Mrs. Harrison, trying to avoid looking at Dad. His supporters had become quieter, with some leaving the courtroom entirely. When the judge returned, she had a grave countenance. She began by noting the case's complexities, including the competing interests at stake. She acknowledged Dad's commitment to the country, but emphasized that military service did not exempt him from parental responsibility. She evaluated the medical evidence and found it both persuasive and unsettling. She noticed the pattern of worsening neglect, the several possibilities for Dad to act, and his decision to prioritize his job over his children's welfare. She believed Grandma was unfit to offer care owing to her alcoholism and history of physical abuse. The judge then addressed Dad's latest attempts to recover custody. While she recognized the excellent efforts he had taken, she felt they were insufficient given the severity of his previous negligence. She was especially concerned about his attempts to sway public opinion and intimidate witnesses. Her ruling was decisive. Permanent custody was granted to the Department of Children's Services. Dad's parental rights were not terminated, but any subsequent contact would necessitate extensive rehabilitation and supervised visits. Grandma was barred from having unsupervised contact with us. Dad erupted. He yelled about injustice and a system that discriminates against veterans. Security approached him, but his lawyer managed to calm him down. As they took him out, he looked at me with such venom that I knew this was not over. Not for him. The courtroom slowly emptied. Sophia hugged me with tears in her eyes. She offered to get us a decent permanent position, perhaps even together, if we were lucky. Mrs. Harrison hugged my shoulder and told me how brave I'd been. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had mostly dispersed. A few demonstrators remained, but their enthusiasm had waned. The plot had grown too sophisticated for simplistic slogans about supporting troops. Children's lives were at risk. The harassment stopped after a few days. The phone calls ended. The vandalism has halted. Dad's tail had crumbled under the weight of evidence. Some of his followers even apologized, claiming they didn't know the whole story. Luca and I were placed together in a therapeutic foster family led by a couple who had previously worked with damaged youngsters. They knew Luca's medical needs and had processes in place to manage his diabetes. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without thinking about insulin schedules. Dad attempted one final persuasion. He wrote me a letter through his lawyer, not to the court. He wrote of forgiveness, family relationships, and how I would come to regret my decisions as I grew older. He proposed that when I became 18, we might reconnect without the court's intervention. I presented the letter to my therapist. We talked about manipulative strategies and how abusers frequently presented themselves as victims. She helped me realize that protecting Luca was not treachery. It was love. True love, not the warped version Dad had taught us. 8 months later, Luca's health had stabilized. His blood sugar was stable, and his weight was normal. The brain damage from the diabetic coma was modest, but he will always require extra assistance with specific tasks. He smiled and played again, acting like the child he was meant to be. I entered high school in a different district. Nobody knew our story. I was simply a kid, not the ungrateful son who had betrayed a military hero. I made pals who had no idea about military culture or family loyalty tests. I had never anticipated such freedom. Dad finally quit arguing. His lawyer informed the court that he was focusing on his new career and would not seek more custody actions. I feared the legal bills had grown too much, or that his new job didn't appreciate the attention. Regardless, the calls and letters ceased. Grandma began a rehab program, but I doubted it would last. She had been drinking for longer than I had lived. But she was at least safe from other vulnerable children. That's what mattered. The permanent foster family that took us in helped us celebrate birthdays and holidays without the pressure of Dad's expectations. They taught us that discipline did not require fear, and that strength did not imply tolerating abuse. They demonstrated what stable, sober caregivers looked like. I still have nightmares occasionally. I wake up believing I hear Dad's boots in the hall or Grandma tripping over furniture. But then I recall where I am. Luca is secure in the next room, and his insulin is properly stored and supplied on time. I last saw Dad at a grocery store 2 years later. He was dressed in civilian clothes and appeared to be older and smaller. Our gazes met across the produce section. For a second, I thought he may approach. Instead, he turned to walk away. I realized I was no longer terrified. Luca has very few memories of Grandma's house, which is a good thing. He is aware that he has diabetes, that he nearly died, and that we are currently living with foster parents. However, the details have disappeared. He is preoccupied with soccer practice and math homework, as is typical of a child. I still have the journal I wrote during those gloomy months. Not to relive the trauma, but to reflect on how far we have come. To remind myself that telling the truth is not treachery, and that protecting the vulnerable is not weakness. Dad was mistaken about what makes someone strong. Sophia still checks in on occasion. She informs me that our situation altered how the county handles military families in difficulty. When military members complain about bias, they must now provide more documentation. They take a deeper look at medical neglect, even when it is disguised with patriotic rhetoric. Last year, the Harrisons sent out a Christmas card. They have successfully fostered 2 additional children after me. They claimed that I had taught them about courage, despite the fact that I had felt anything but brave during those dreadful weeks at home. They claimed they still had my room available in case I needed it. I'm now applying to universities, intending to study social work. My guidance counselor feels my article about overcoming adversity is fascinating, but she doesn't know the entire story. I write about resilience and protecting others, leaving away specifics but conveying true emotions. Luca aspires to be a doctor, inspired by Dr. Anika Novak, who saved his life. He volunteers at diabetes camps, teaching young people how to manage their condition. He explains that taking insulin is not a sign of weakness. It is what keeps them strong enough to achieve their objectives. I sometimes wonder what Dad tells himself about losing us. Whether he continues to portray himself as the victim, the tortured veteran betrayed by ungrateful children, or whether, in quiet moments, he recalls Luca unconscious in that hospital bed and feels the weight of his decisions. But I don't really think about Dad. I am focused on my future, Luca's health, and creating a life free of manipulation and fear. We survived. We are safe. We are united. That was more than I could have hoped for during the dreadful months when Dad used his uniform against us. The scars remain. Trust develops gradually. Authority figures still make me nervous. But I've realized that true strength isn't about bearing abuse or remaining silent, it is about safeguarding those who are unable to defend themselves. Even when the entire world appears to be against you, even when the abuser wears a uniform and calls it love. This is the kind of knowledge that most adults never understand. And now this youngster is launching truth bombs left and right. 3 years after my sister defended my attacker, he struck again, at her own wedding. Now she's divorced, in therapy, and drowning in guilt. I've been with my partner for 6 years now since we first met. He's really close to my family and always shows up for our key events. My sister has been seeing her fiancé for 3 years, and they became engaged 8 months ago. She is the type of girl who has always wanted to be married. It didn't matter who proposed. She simply wanted to get married. In the beginning of her relationship, she duped me into going on a double date with her fiancé and his brother. She had stated that it was dinner with her and a buddy, but it was clearly not. The brother kept making unwanted advances at me the entire time, and I told him I had a partner, so the setting made me uncomfortable. During dinner, as I was using the restroom, the fiancé's brother followed me and attempted to touch me. I told my sister, but she sided with her fiancé's brother and refused to believe me. At their engagement party, my partner observed that the brother couldn't stop staring at me, so we did our best to avoid him. Every time I see this person, he acts strangely towards me. My sister wanted me, my twin, and 2 brothers to attend her wedding. The wedding is scheduled for next month, mid-June. My sister just told me that I'll be walking down the aisle beside her fiancé's brother. I told her he was making me uncomfortable, and he touched me. I mentioned that I expected I'd be walking with my brother. Apparently her fiancé insists on this, and she wants to make him happy. It seems strange to insist on something like that, and I'm sure it's a plot between the 2 brothers. My other siblings thought it was strange and expressed their concerns to our sister. She became agitated and said, "This is her wedding, and she'll do whatever she wants." I informed my boyfriend about this, and he was unhappy for me. He's confident enough in himself to know that this person will never be a competitor, but he understands how uncomfortable I feel in the circumstance. We had a family meal at my mother's house recently. I used this as an opportunity to bring up the aisle dilemma with my mother present. I refrained from discussing the touching because it happened a while ago. Besides, I'd already told my sister and hinted at it to my parents, but nothing was done. I just discussed the aisle situation. My sister became quite agitated and began crying, accusing me of attempting to destroy her marriage. I was perplexed, as did everyone else, and attempted to explain that he makes both me and my boyfriend quite uncomfortable. She then told me that I couldn't bring my boyfriend to her wedding anymore, and that if I did, I wouldn't be a bridesmaid. She gave no explanation for why I couldn't bring him, and my siblings were as furious. given that they prefer my boyfriend over my sister's fiancé. I thought I'd give her a few days to cool off and reconsider, but she hasn't changed her mind. My 20-year-old brother's girlfriend remains invited to the wedding. My partner is an amazing guy who has been nothing but nice and generous to my sister. His feelings are bruised, yet he still wants me to attend the wedding. I believe my sister is being unreasonable, and I will be quite upset at the wedding if my life partner is not present. I have no idea what to do, and my family is no help either. Julian, my twin brother, called me aside after dinner. He grasped my shoulders and stared me directly in the eyes. "This is ridiculous, Elena. Do you know that?" His hand shook slightly. "The way Sophie exploded like that. Something isn't right here." I nodded, wiping tears away with the back of my palm. My mother remained in the kitchen, purposefully clanging dishes louder than necessary. She always did this when she wanted to avoid conflict. My father had already retired to his study, mumbling something about needing to check emails. Nico, my youngest brother, kicked a dining room chair. "This is so..." My girlfriend Amelie is still invited, but Luca cannot attend. He's been around much longer than her fiancé. He slipped his hands into his pockets. "I'm calling Sophie out on this." "Don't," I replied hastily. "It'll just make things worse." But Nico had already pulled out his phone. I watched him typing furiously with his jaw gritted. Within seconds his phone vibrated. His expression hardened as he read the response. "She says, it's different because I'm in the wedding party and you're just a bridesmaid." He slammed his phone on the table. "Like that makes any sense." Julian went back and forth through the dining room. "We should talk to her together. All three of us make her see sense." I shake my head. "You didn't notice her expression when I brought it up. She looked at me as if I were an enemy." My voice cracked. "All I said was that Adrian makes me uncomfortable." "Adrian!" Julian spat out the name. "That is his name. The creep who refuses to leave you alone." I had not intended to utter his name, but it slipped out. I dropped into a chair, my legs suddenly weakening. At the engagement reception he kept making reasons to be near me. Luca noticed before I did. We spent half of the night dodging him. Nico threw his fist upon the table. "And now Sophie wants you to walk arm in arm with him while your actual boyfriend sits at home." My mother eventually came from the kitchen, dish towel in hand. She refused to meet my gaze. "Maybe you should just do what your sister asks, Elena. It's only a day." "Mom." Julian whirled on her. "Are you serious now?" She twisted the dish towel in her hands. "I just don't want to see the family torn apart over this." "The family is already being torn apart," Nico told me, "by Sophie and her insane demands." My phone vibrated. Luca's name appeared on screen. I responded quickly, anxious to hear his voice. "Hey," he said softly. "How did it go?" "Terribly." I stepped out onto the back porch for privacy. "She banned you from the wedding." Silence stretched between us. I could hear him breathing and absorbing the information. Eventually, he spoke. "Why don't you want to stroll with that guy?" "Because I dared to say it in front of our mother?" I sat on the porch steps, bringing my knees up to my chest. "Luca, I'm very sorry. This is quite unfair to you." "Quit apologizing. This isn't your fault." His voice was calm, but I could hear the pain beneath. "After 6 years together, you've decided not to invite me to your sister's wedding because you want to protect yourself from a predator." The word lingered in the air between us. Predator. We'd never said it out, but we both knew Adrian was like that. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Part of me wants to skip the whole thing, but then I'll be the sister who ruined Sophie's wedding." "You wouldn't be ruining anything. She's doing that all on her own." Luca was silent. "But I know how much your family means to you. If you need to go, I'll understand." "Without you? Walk down that aisle with Adrian while you're sitting at home?" My tone was raised. "That's not happening." "Then don't go," he replied simply. "Elena, you've spent your whole life trying to keep peace in your family. Maybe it's time to choose yourself." After we hung up, I sat on the porch until the sun began to drop. Julian met me there carrying a blanket and 2 mugs of tea. "I called Sophie," he continued, sitting alongside me. "Tried to talk sense into her, and she hung up on me." He handed me a mug. "But not before saying some horrible things about you. Trying to divert focus away from her big day." I laughed bitterly. "By not wanting to be groped by her future brother-in-law?" Julian's face clouded. "Is that what happened? He actually touched you?" I stared at my tea, watching the steam rise. 3 years ago, on that double date she duped me into, he followed me to the restroom and. I couldn't finish the statement. Jesus, Elena. Julian firmly laid down his mug. Sophie knows this? I told her that night. She said I must have misunderstood his intentions. The recollection lingered. Said Adrian told her I came on to him. That's complete. Julian stood up again, pacing. We need to tell Mom and Dad the whole story. I tried hints before, but they didn't want to hear it. I tightened the blanket around myself. Nobody wants to believe that Sophie's perfect wedding involves forcing me to walk with my assaulter. The word tasted odd in my mouth. Assaulter. But it is who he was. Over the next few days, my phone was inundated with texts. Extended family members immediately expressed their feelings regarding my selfishness. Sophie had apparently been calling everyone, portraying me as the monster who was jealous of her happiness. My aunt sent a text. Your sister only gets one wedding day. Can't you put aside your feelings for a few hours? My cousin left a message. I heard you're causing drama about the processional. That's pretty petty, Elena. Each message felt like an additional weight on my chest. I presented them to Luca when he arrived for supper. This is insane, he exclaimed, skimming through the texts. She's turned the entire family against you. Not everyone. I pointed to the living room where Julian and Nico were preparing a movie. The boys are on my side. 3 against the rest of the family. Luca put down my phone. Those aren't great odds. Nico heard and came over. Actually, I've been doing some digging. Amelie's cousin went to college with Adrian. She says he had a reputation for being handsy at parties. My stomach twisted. Of course he did. There's more, Nico added. Amelie heard from her cousin that Adrian's been telling people at their engagement parties that he and Elena have history. Luca's face became hard. He's telling people what? Yeah, apparently he makes it sound like they had a thing. Nico expressed distaste. Amelie didn't want to say anything before, but after what happened at dinner. She thought Elena should know. I felt nauseous. Adrian was fabricating a story in which we had agreed on something, laying the groundwork for further deception. I need to confront Sophie with this, I stated, standing up. No. Julian placed his hand on my shoulder. Let me and Nico do it. If it comes from you, she'll just say you're making things up. They departed that evening to go meet Sophie at her flat. I walked my living room as Luca attempted to divert me with work anecdotes. 2 hours later, my brothers returned, looking defeated. She wouldn't even let us in, Julian explained. Talked to us through the door chain. Nico hurled himself onto my couch. She said Adrian already told her about the history thing, claims you led him on at the double date, and now you're embarrassed about it. That's not what happened, I exclaimed, shocking myself with the volume. We know, Julian replied kindly. But she's choosing to believe him. Or at least pretend she does. Luca placed his arms around me as I started crying. Not soft tears, but angry, frustrated sobbing. 6 years of keeping the peace, swallowing my words to keep everyone pleased. And this is where it went. My telephone rang. Mom. Elena, you need to apologize to your sister, she stated without pause. This has gone too far. Apologize for what? I placed her on speaker for everyone to hear. For not wanting to walk with someone who assaulted me? Don't be dramatic. Your sister says it was a misunderstanding. Mom, he followed me into a restaurant bathroom and put his hands on me. That's not a misunderstanding. Silence. Then. That was 3 years ago, Elena. Can't you move past it for your sister's sake? I hung up. The next morning I received more texts. This time from Sophie herself. If you really cared about my happiness, you'd stop making this about you. Adrian is going to be family. You need to get over yourself. I can't believe you're trying to ruin my wedding over some supposed incident from years ago. That final one made me see crimson. A supposed event. I screenshotted each message and emailed it to my brothers. Within minutes they both called me. That's it, Julian said. I'm done trying to reason with her. Same, Nico said. If she wants to prioritize that creep over her own sister, that's on her. Despite their encouragement, I felt split. The wedding was 4 weeks away. RSVPs have been sent. My bridesmaid dress hung in my closet, a lavender memory of happier times when Sophie and I planned our ideal weddings together. Luca saw me gazing at the outfit one evening. You don't have to decide right now, he said me, throwing his arms around me from behind. The wedding is in 4 weeks, and you can decide on the morning of if you want. He kissed my temples. Whatever you choose, I support you. Even if I go without you? His arms tightened slightly. Even then though, I'd be lying if I said it wouldn't hurt. I turned into his arms to face him. It's not fair. You've been to every family Christmas, every birthday, every celebration for 6 years. You helped my dad fix the deck last summer. You taught Nico to drive stick shift, and now you're banned because I won't walk with someone who hurt me. Life isn't fair, he explained simply. But that doesn't mean you have to accept it. 3 weeks before the wedding, I made one final try. I texted Sophie and asked to meet for coffee, just the two of us. To my astonishment, she consented. We gathered at our old favorite cafe, where we used to study throughout college. She appeared exhausted, with worry reflected in the dark circles beneath her eyes. Planning a wedding is exhausting, she stated as a greeting. I nodded and ordered my normal latte. We sat in uneasy quiet until the drinks arrived. Sophie, I said softly. I need you to understand what Adrian did. Stop. She raised her hand. I don't want to hear another word about ancient history. 3 years isn't ancient history. It is when you're trying to destroy my relationship. Her voice increased, leading other customers to stare. Do you know what situation you're placing me in? My fiance's family already thinks you are tough because you refuse to give Adrian a chance. I've got a guy. Why should I give Adrian any chance? That's not the point. She fiercely swirled her coffee. The point is, you're making me choose between my sister and my future family. No, you're choosing between your sister's safety and your fiance's brother's feelings. I shifted my weight. He assaulted me, Sophie. He tells them that we have history. He stares at me at all family gatherings. And you want me to walk arm in arm with him while my real partner is prohibited from going. Luca is not banned, she stated politely. You're choosing to exclude him by being difficult about the processional. That's the same thing. She rose abruptly. I'm done talking about this. You have the option of being my bridesmaid and participating in the processional I have prepared, or staying at home. But quit attempting to manipulate me with your victim complex. She left me sitting there, my coffee getting cold and her words reverberating in my ears. Victim complex. That night, I made a decision. I called Luca first. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear his concern before I said anything. I'm done, I said. My voice unusually calm. I'm not going to the wedding. Are you sure? He inquired kindly. I don't want you to regret this later. The only thing I'd regret is walking down that aisle with Adrian while you're sitting at home. I held my phone more tightly. She described it as my victim complex. Can you believe it? Luca was silent for a bit. When he spoke, his voice was tense with repressed wrath. She's deceiving you. Do you know that? I knew. But seeing him say it aloud made it more real, and it stung more than I had anticipated. The next morning, I awoke to find Julian and Nico already in my apartment. They had let themselves in with the spare key and were preparing breakfast in my kitchen. We figured you might need moral support, Julian explained, cooking pancakes and food. Nico was swiping through his phone, his look becoming darker with each swipe. Sophie's been posting on social media about ungrateful family members trying to sabotage her happiness. She's not naming names, Julian said hastily, noticing my expression. But anyone who knows the situation knows she means you. I slid into a bar stool at my kitchen counter. I haven't even told her I'm not coming yet. She's preempting, Nico replied. Getting her version out there first. My phone vibrated. A text from my cousin Isabel. I saw Sophie's posts. What's actually going on? Before I could react, another text arrived, followed by another. Within minutes my phone was filled with messages from extended family members, all of whom wanted to know what was going on. Don't respond yet, Julian said, setting a plate of pancakes in front of me. Eat first, and then we'll figure out a strategy. But I could not eat. My stomach was knotted. 6 years of meticulously keeping family unity, and it was all coming apart because I refused to be partnered with my assaulter. That afternoon, my father finally called. I was wondering when he'd end his stillness. Your mother is very upset, he said, revealing everything I needed to know about where this talk was going. I'm upset too, Dad. He breathed deeply. Elena, I know this situation isn't ideal, but sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family. Sacrifices. My voice was filled with disbelief. Adrian sexually assaulted me, Dad. He followed me into the bathroom and placed his hands on me. That is not a sacrifice. That is asking me to accept abuse. That's a very serious accusation, he stated cautiously. This is not an accusation. This is what occurred. I was pacing with my free hand clenched into a fist. I informed Sophie immediately. I tried to tell you and Mom. Nobody wants to hear it. Your sister says you misunderstood. I didn't misunderstand him pressing me against a wall. I didn't misunderstand someone following me into a bathroom and grabbing me. I did not misinterpret having to physically shove him away and lock myself in a stall until he departed. Silence on the other end. Then why didn't you tell us this earlier? I tried, but every time I brought it up, you and Mom changed the subject, or Sophie interrupted to say I was being dramatic. Tears were spilling down my cheeks now. And now she wants me to link arms with him and smile while my boyfriend of 6 years sits at home. Maybe if you just talk to Adrian. I hung up with my father. I had never done that before. My hands were shaking. Julian, who had been listening from the couch, got up instantly. That is it. I am calling Dad myself. Don't, I whispered softly. It won't help. But Julian was already phoning. I listened to his side of the talk and watched his expression change from annoyed to furious. No, Dad, you listen to me, he responded, his tone absolutely calm. Elena's telling the truth. I've seen Adrian at every family gathering since. The way he looks at her and tries to approach her is predatory. And you're asking her not only to be near him, but to physically touch him in front of everyone she cares about. A pause, followed by, I don't care if it rocks the boat. Some boats should be rocked. He hung up and turned to me. Dad says I'm being influenced by your version of events. Nico hurled a pillow across the room, frustrated. This is insane. How come everyone is siding with Sophie and not listening to Elena? Because it's easier. I replied gently. It's easier to believe I'm being dramatic than to accept that Sophie is choosing her fiancé's family over her sister's safety. That evening, Luca arrived after work. He discovered me surrounded by printed screenshots of text messages, attempting to arrange them chronologically. What is all this? He asked, placing down his laptop bag. Evidence, I stated. In case I need to explain to people why I'm not at the wedding. He sat near me and picked up one of the papers. It was a screenshot of Sophie's text regarding my alleged encounter. You don't owe anyone an explanation, he remarked kindly. I know, but I also know how this family works. If I don't have receipts, I'll be painted as the sister who was jealous of Sophie's happiness and skipped her wedding out of spite. Luca drew me into his side. Have I told you lately how proud I am of you? For what? For causing family drama 4 weeks before my sister's wedding. For standing up for yourself. For refusing to be silenced. For choosing your safety over keeping the peace. He kissed the top of my head. I know how hard this is for you. The following few days were a whirl of family politics. Aunts and uncles called, each attempting to mediate. Most of them began with some variation of, and I am sure this is all a misunderstanding. My Aunt Helena was the absolute worst. Elena dear, you know how men can be. Sometimes they're just more affectionate than we're comfortable with. That doesn't make them bad people. He followed me into a bathroom, Aunt Helena. Well, maybe he just needed to use the facilities too. It was the women's bathroom. That briefly silenced her. Still, is it worth missing your sister's wedding over something that happened years ago? I began keeping track of how many family members used the statement years ago, as if time had made assault acceptable. By day 3, I'd reached 14. Nico's girlfriend Amélie came by suddenly one afternoon. She appeared worried, fiddling with her car keys. I need to tell you something, she said. About Adrian. My stomach sank. What about him? My cousin. The one who went to college with him. She reached out after Nico told me what was happening. Amélie sat down, still holding her keys. She said she didn't tell me everything before. Adrian, he had to leave his fraternity junior year. There were multiple complaints from girls at parties. Complaints about what? I inquired, although I already knew the answer. Inappropriate touching. Following girls who were trying to get away from him. One girl said he cornered her in a bathroom at a frat party. Amélie's gaze met mine. Sound familiar? I felt nauseous. Did anything happen to him? The fraternity quietly removed him, but the school didn't take action because no one filed formal reports. The girls were all told it would be he said, she said, and Adrian's father apparently donated a lot to the school. Of course he did, I said, laughing cruelly. Let me guess. His family has money. Amélie nodded. Old money. The kind that makes problems go away. After she departed, I sat with this newfound knowledge. Adrian wasn't just some creep who targeted me. He was a serial predator, shielded by wealth and position. My sister was marrying into that family. I called Julian immediately. "We need to tell Sophie about Adrian's history." "She won't believe it," he explained. "You know she won't. We have to try." So we did. Julian, Nico and I visited Sophie's place that evening. This time, she let us in, despite the fact that her fiancé was clearly present. "We have information about Adrian that you need to hear," Julian told you. Sophie's fiancé Luca tightened up immediately. "If this is another attempt to slander my brother—" "It's not slander if it's true," Nico interjected. "He was kicked out of his fraternity for assaulting multiple women." "That's a lie," Luca stated plainly. "Adrian left the fraternity because he was too busy with his studies." "Amélie's cousin was there," I explained. "She knows girls who filed complaints." Sophie laughed when she heard Amélie's cousin. "How convenient. A friend of a friend of a friend says something bad about Adrian just when Elena needs ammunition against him." "This isn't ammunition," I remarked, frustrated. "This is a pattern of behavior. He did to those girls exactly what he did to me." "What he allegedly did to you," Luca clarified. "Adrian told me what really happened that night. You came onto him. He politely declined because you had a boyfriend, and now you're embarrassed about it." "That's not what happened." I got up, my entire body trembling with wrath. "He followed me into the women's bathroom and grabbed me." "The women's bathroom?" Luca asked, smirking. "Adrian would never do that. He's too much of a gentleman." "Your brother is a predator," Julian stated bluntly. "And if you can't see that, get out," Sophie murmured gently. "All of you, get out of my home." "Sophie, please." I tried once more. "I'm your sister. Why would I lie about this?" She stared me directly in the eyes. "Because you've always been jealous of me. I'm younger, but I'm getting married first. I found someone who wants to build a life with me while you're still just dating after 6 years." The word struck me like a physical blow. "You think I'm making up sexual assault because I'm jealous that you're getting married? I think you're making a big deal out of nothing because you can't stand that my wedding isn't about you." She opened her flat door. "Leave and don't contact me again unless it's to apologize." We departed in startled silence. Nico punched the elevator wall, causing a minor damage. "She's lost her mind," he remarked. "Completely lost it." "She's in too deep," Julian remarked gently. "She's chosen her side, and now she has to defend it no matter what." That night I was unable to sleep. I kept reliving Sophie's statements, feeling jealous and making it about myself. Luca held me while I cried, not saying anything, just being present. The next morning I awoke to see my mother in the living room. Luca let her in on his way to work. "We need to talk," she said. I brewed coffee to keep my hands busy. When I sat down across from her, I observed she appeared older and exhausted. "Your father told me what you said about the bathroom." I waited, not trusting my ability to speak. "Why didn't you tell me?" she inquired, sounding genuinely interested for the first time. "I tried, Mom, but every time I brought up Adrian making me uncomfortable, you or Dad would change the subject, or Sophie would interrupt, or you'd tell me not to cause drama." She was silent for a long time. "I suppose we did do that." "You suppose?" "I just wanted everyone to get along," she explained weakly. "I thought if we didn't make a big deal out of it, it would go away." "It doesn't go away, Mom." "Adrian didn't go away. He kept staring, kept trying to get close to me, and now Sophie wants me to walk with him. And when I said no, she banned Luca from the wedding. She's under a lot of stress with the wedding planning." "Stop." I raised my hand. "Stop making excuses for her. She knows what Adrian did. She's choosing not to believe me. That's not stress. That's a choice." My mother twisted her wedding band around her finger, an anxious habit I inherited. "So, you're really not going to the wedding? Would you go? If Dad was banned because you wouldn't walk with someone who assaulted you, would you go?" She didn't respond, which was enough. After she went, I felt weary but strangely clearer than I had in weeks. The lines were drawn. I knew where everybody stood. Over the next week the family schism widened. Cousins picked sides. Aunts and uncles murmured during family gatherings that I no longer attended. Sophie resumed her social media campaign, blogging about toxic family members and the need of eliminating negativity. Isabel, my cousin who had texted earlier, came to see me. She was one of the few family members who hadn't taken sides yet. "I need to hear your version," she stated simply. So I told her everything. The double date arrangement, the bathroom attack, Adrian looking at every family gathering, the engagement party where Luca and I spent the night avoiding him, Sophie's ultimatum, and everything else. Isabel burst into tears as I concluded. Elena, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. No one wants to have any idea, I told them. It's easier to believe I'm being difficult. I believe you, she replied firmly. And I'm not going to the wedding either. Isabel, no, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I have a daughter, Elena. She's only 4 now, but someday she'll be a young woman. How can I go to a wedding that celebrates silencing assault victims? What message does that send? Her support meant more to me than I could explain, but it also resulted in additional family conflict. Sophie called me screaming when she learned Isabel was boycotting the wedding. You're turning the whole family against me, she sobbed into the phone. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you're ruining it. I'm not doing anything, I explained, trying to remain cool. I told Isabel the truth when she asked. She made her own decision. The truth? Your version of the truth? You mean Adrian's a good guy? Luca says. Luca is his brother. Of course he's going to defend him. And you're my sister. You're supposed to defend me. I tried to, Sophie. I tried to protect you by telling you what kind of person Adrian is. You chose not to listen. She hung up on me. 3 weeks before the wedding, things became much more serious. Luca began phoning Julian at work and leaving messages about how I was ruining their family. He actually told Luca to control his girlfriend better. Luca explained, showing me the SMS messages. Like your property I'm supposed to manage, he exclaimed. I'm so sorry you're getting dragged into this. I told you. He clasped my face in his hands and said, Hey. We're a team. Your battles are my battles. Though, I have to say your future brother-in-law seems like a real piece of work. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, apparently. Luca's jaws constricted. Has Adrian tried to contact you? No, thank God. Though Nico said he saw him at the gym yesterday. Adrian made some comment about looking forward to the wedding. That's it. Luca took out his phone. I'm calling Julian back. This needs to stop. I listened as Luca gently but firmly informed Julian that any more contact from him or Adrian would result in legal action. The threat of attorneys seems to work. The calls ceased, but the familial pressure continued. Every day brought new attempts at reconciliation, but they all followed the same pattern. I must apologize. I should be a bigger person. I should think about Sophie's happiness. Nobody mentioned Sophie should think about my safety. Julian and Nico arranged an intervention 2 weeks before their wedding. They arrived at my apartment with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. We've been thinking, Julian explained, unpacking the food. Maybe you should write Sophie a letter. Lay out everything one final time. Then at least you'll know you tried everything. What's the point? I inquired. She won't believe me. The point is your own peace of mind, Nico explained. Years from now, you'll know you gave her every chance to make this right. So I wrote a letter. It took me 4 days and several drafts. I explained everything. The attack, Adrian's persistent behavior, my attempts to resolve it discreetly, her failure to believe me, and the unfairness of banning Luca. What I said was this. I love you, Sophie. You're my sister, and that will never change. But I cannot and will not put myself in a position where I have to touch the man who assaulted me. I cannot celebrate while my partner of 6 years is excluded for the crime of supporting me. If you change your mind, even at the last minute, we'll be there. But I won't sacrifice my safety and self-respect for anyone, not even you. I emailed it to her email address and waited. The response arrived within hours. Not from Sophie, but from Luca's brother Adrian. Your sister showed me your manipulative letter. It's clear you're mentally unstable and determined to destroy our happiness. You're no longer welcome at our wedding or in our lives. Any further contact will be considered harassment. I stared at the email, reading it repeatedly. Sophie has already been assimilated into Luca's family. No longer an individual, but a member of a group that did not include me. That's it then, I said Luca, showing him the email. He read it, and his expression darkened. Mentally unstable. They're really going all in on the gaslighting. I'm done, I replied. And I intended it. I tried. My conscience is clear. The final week before the wedding felt unreal. Family members made last-ditch efforts to persuade me to reconsider my mind. My bridesmaid dress hung in my wardrobe like a ghost. Sophie blocked me on all social media, but Julian told me she was uploading beautiful wedding prep photographs as if nothing was wrong. 4 days before the wedding, my father made one final attempt. He arrived at my apartment alone, appearing uncomfortable. Your mother has no idea I am here, he said. Okay. I've been thinking about what you said about the bathroom. He was unable to meet my gaze. I believe you, Elena. The words should have meant something, but they were too late. But you still think I should go to the wedding? He exhaled. I think sometimes families have to work around difficult people. We don't have to like everyone, but we show up. Adrian isn't difficult, Dad. He's dangerous. And Sophie is choosing him over me. She's choosing her fiancé's family. It's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. I was too tired to be angry any longer. Dad, what would you do if someone hurt Mom? Would you just work around them? He did not respond, but his silence told volumes. After he went, I sat in my apartment, staring at the family photos on my wall, including Sophie and me at Christmas last year, laughing at something Julian had said. The 5 of us siblings attended our parents' anniversary party. Luca and I celebrated Thanksgiving with my entire family. Those moments felt like they were from another lifetime now. The night before the wedding, I couldn't get comfortable. Luca suggested we go out and do something to take my mind off things, but everywhere we went, I pondered what was going on at the rehearsal dinner that I was not attending. She made her choice, Luca softly reminded me as we strolled through the park. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I know. It just hurts. I know it does. He squeezed my hand. But I'm proud of you for choosing yourself. My phone buzzed while we strolled. Nico texted, "Rehearsal was weird without you." Sophie had Luca's cousin step in as a bridesmaid. Mom cried. Dad seemed unhappy. Adrian joked that you were too delicate to fulfill wedding chores. I switched my phone off. Tomorrow, as Sophie walked down the aisle, I'd be anywhere but there. And for the first time since the mess began, I was positive I was making the proper decision. The morning of the wedding was dreary and drizzling, which seemed suitable. I awoke early, as if my body had not received the signal that I didn't need to be somewhere. Luca was already awake and preparing coffee in the kitchen. How are you feeling? Strange, I confessed. Like I should be somewhere else. You are exactly where you should be, he firmly stated, offering me a drink. My phone started buzzing at 7 a.m. Text messages from extended relatives wondering if I had changed my mind, if I was coming, and if there was still time to rectify this. I switched it off without responding. Julian and Nico arrived around 10 o'clock, dressed in groomsmen garb. They appeared attractive but uncomfortable. We wanted to see you before we went, Julian explained. Make sure you're okay. I'm okay, I said, mostly meaning it. You two look good. Feel like traitors, Nico mumbled, yanking on his tie. You're not traitors. You're brothers trying to support both sisters in an impossible situation. I hugged each of them. Go try to have fun. They departed reluctantly, and the apartment seemed too quiet. Luca suggested we go wherever, but I couldn't seem to get off the couch. I keep thinking about when we were kids, I confessed. Sophie and I used to plan our weddings together. We'd be each other's maids of honor. Our kids would grow up together. We had it all figured out. Life rarely goes according to our childhood plans, Luca explained gently. I know. I just never imagined it would go this wrong. Around noon, as I realized the ceremony was about to begin, I finally broke down. Luca held me while I grieved, grieving not just for the wedding I was missing, but also for the relationship with my sister, which would never repair. She chose him, I exclaimed. She chose a predator and his enabling family over her own sister. She chose the illusion of a perfect wedding over the reality of who she was marrying into. Luca corrects. And someday she'll have to face that reality. As it turned out, someday arrived sooner than anyone anticipated. The reception was scheduled for 3 p.m. I knew this since Nico texted me the timeline weeks ago, when we still assumed I'd be there. At 3:30 my phone rang. Julian. Elena, something happened. His speech was strained, barely heard above the background commotion. I sat up straighter. What's wrong? Adrian cornered one of the servers during cocktail hour. Luca's cousin Victor saw the whole thing. The girl was trying to get past him to the kitchen, and he blocked her path, put his hands on her waist. Julian dropped his voice. She's 20. The catering manager is threatening to pull his entire staff. My heart pounded. Where's Sophie? Getting her makeup touched up. She doesn't know yet. Luca is trying to smooth things over with the catering company, offering them more money to stay quiet. Of course he is. I grabbed Luca's hand. Is the server okay? Shaken up. Victor's girlfriend got her away from Adrian and took her outside. The girl's manager wants to call the police, but Luca is begging him not to. I heard shouts in the background. Julian cursed behind his breath. I have to go. The photographer just quit. Apparently, Adrian made comments about her appearance when she was setting up earlier. The call went dead. Luca and I sat in startled silence. Nico called around 25 minutes later. You're not going to believe this. Isabel just caused a scene. Isabel's there? I thought she wasn't going. She came for the ceremony but skipped the cocktail hour. When she heard about the server, she stood up during Luca's father's toast and announced what Adrian did in front of everyone. I covered my lips with my hand. Oh God. Half the room is in chaos. Luca's mother is screaming at Isabel. Dad's trying to mediate. Mom's crying and Sophie. Nico sighed. Sophie slapped Isabel. She what? Slapped her right there in front of 180 guests. Then she grabbed the microphone and said anyone who believed Isabel's lies could leave. My phone beeped. Another call coming in. Nico, Julian's calling. I'll call you back. I switched over. Julian was breathing rapidly. Elena, it's getting worse. 3 of Luca's fraternity brothers just confronted Adrian about the server. Turns out they knew about his history at college. One of them, Marco Keller, said he's been waiting years to call Adrian out publicly. Where's security? There is no security. Sophie thought it was an unnecessary expense. He laughed angrily. The venue manager is threatening to shut the whole thing down. Guests are leaving in droves. I overheard a crash in the background. What was that? Adrian just shoved Marco Keller into the gift table. Nico's trying to break it up. I have to go help. The following hour was a haze of fragmentary updates. Isabel provided images of the mayhem, including upturned chairs, strewn centerpieces, and Sophie's mascara pouring down her cheeks as she yelled at departing guests. The catering staff had walked out. The DJ was loading his equipment. At 4:45 p.m., my father called. His voice sounded hollow. The wedding's over. The venue kicked everyone out. Dad, I'm so sorry. Are you? He seemed genuinely curious, not accusing. Because I'm starting to think you're the only one who saw this coming. Where's Sophie? Luca took her back to their hotel. She's not handling it well. Your mother went with them. He was grumbling. Elena, I owe you an apology. When Marco Keller told us about Adrian's college history, when that young server was crying, I kept thinking about you in that bathroom 3 years ago. It's too late for apologies, Dad. I know. I just needed to say it. After we hung up, I sat down on our couch with Luca to process everything. My phone kept buzzing with texts from family members who had witnessed the accident. Each account added additional information. Adrian appears to have propositioned 2 additional women throughout the reception. Luca attempted to physically block guests from leaving. Sophie had torn her dress while chasing after Isabel. That evening, Julian and Nico arrived. They were weary, even in their ragged groomsmen clothes. It was worse than we could tell you over the phone, Julian remarked, dropping on my couch. After the venue kicked us out, Adrian tried to follow that server to her car. Her manager had to physically restrain him while she drove away. Is she pressing charges? Luca inquired. Her manager wants her to, but she's scared. Adrian's family has money. Good lawyers. Nico unfastened his tie. Same old story. What about Sophie? The brothers exchanged looks. She's in denial, Julian finally said, blaming everyone but Adrian. Says Isabel ruined her wedding. The server was overreacting. The photographer was too sensitive. Luca is enabling it, Nico added. He's already spinning it as a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't respond, but something made me pick up. Is this Elena? Said a young woman, anxious and apprehensive. Yes. Who's this? I'm Emily. I was the server at your sister's wedding today. Your cousin Isabel gave me your number. I hope that's okay. Of course. Are you all right? Her voice shook as she said, I'm trying to be. I wanted to thank you. Isabel told me about what happened to you. Why you weren't there. It helped to know I wasn't alone, that someone else understood. I'm so sorry this happened to you. My manager wants me to file a police report, but I'm scared. Adrian's brother already called the catering company, threatening to sue for defamation if I say anything publicly. That's witness intimidation, Luca stated loudly enough for her to hear. That's illegal. Emily asked, Who's that? My boyfriend. He's right. They can't threaten you for telling the truth. Would you? She paused. Would you come with me to file the report? I know we don't know each other, but Isabel said you'd understand. I looked at Luca, who nodded instantly. Of course. When? Tomorrow morning, the officer said 9 a.m. We'll be there. After she hung up, I sat back and felt the weight of the day. My sister's wedding had gone precisely as I had expected, but worse. Now, another young woman was suffering with Adrian's predatory conduct. You did the right thing, Luca remarked, understanding my expression. Not going today. I know. It just doesn't feel like winning. It's not about winning, Julian explained. It's about protecting yourself. The following morning, Luca and I met Amelie at the police station. She was younger than I expected, maybe 20, and had tense hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Her manager, Victor, an older man, joined her. Adrian's lawyer has already called me 3 times, Victor informed us while Amelie was presenting her statement. Offering money, threatening lawsuits, but I've been in this business 25 years. I'm not letting another creep get away with hurting one of my staff. The officer collecting the report was thorough, asking comprehensive questions about what happened. When Amelie indicated that several witnesses had seen Adrian corner her, the officer's attention increased. Who else saw this? Luca's cousin, some fraternity brothers, the photographer who quit, Amelie muttered. Amelie stared at me and said, and apparently, he has a history of this behavior. I spent the following hour delivering my own statement on the restroom assault 3 years ago. It seemed odd to finally have someone in charge take it seriously. The officer made notes, asked follow-up questions, and treated it as a crime. As we were leaving, we came across Marco Keller in the parking lot. He had come to make his own statement about what he'd seen at the wedding. I should have said something years ago, he replied. When Adrian was doing this stuff in college, but we all just looked the other way. Figured it wasn't our problem. And now? I asked. Now I have a daughter. She's only 3. But someday. He shook his head. I can't be the guy who stayed silent anymore. Over the next few days, more stories surfaced. The photographer has filed her own complaint. 2 guests complained about Adrian's disrespectful statements. Isabel linked me with 3 women from Adrian's college who were finally willing to speak up. Luca's family attempted damage management. They produced remarks about misconceptions and overreactions, but the truth had gained momentum. The venue prohibited them from ever returning. The catering firm has blacklisted them. Wedding vendors throughout town issued warnings about the family. Sophie called me a week after the wedding for the first time since everything had fallen apart. Are you happy now? Her voice sounded rough from crying. My wedding is ruined, my reputation is destroyed, and it's all over social media. Sophie, no. You listen. Adrian made some mistakes, but you've blown this completely out of proportion. One incident 3 years ago. It wasn't one incident. You know that now. You saw what happened at your own wedding. That server was flirting with him. She was 20 and trying to do her job, just like I was trying to go to the bathroom when he cornered me. I maintained a consistent tone. And the photographer? The other guests who've come forward? Were they all flirting too? Silence. Later. Luca says his brother is just friendly. People misinterpret. Sophie, stop. Please. You know the truth. You've always known. I have to leave. Her voice sounded quiet. Luca's calling me. She hung up. It would be the last time we talked for months. The legal process progressed slowly. Adrian engaged expensive lawyers who did everything to get the accusations dropped. But Amelie remained resolute, backed by the other women who had come forward. I attended each hearing, sitting in the gallery with Luca and my brothers. Of course, Luca supported Adrian by paying his bail, hiring his lawyers, and posting on social media about his brother's bogus accusation. Sophie repeated every phrase, criticizing anyone who dared to speak against her brother-in-law. 4 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Julian called me at work. Sophie left Luca. I almost dropped my phone. What? She showed up at Mom and Dad's an hour ago with 2 suitcases. Won't say what happened, but she's been crying non-stop. Did she say anything about? No. Nothing about you or the wedding or any of it. She just keeps saying she needs to stay there for a while. I wanted to feel vindicated, but instead I felt sad. Is she okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally, I don't think she's been okay for a while. That evening my mother called. I know you and Sophie aren't speaking, but I thought you should know she's home, she whispered quietly. Julian informed me. Elena. She paused, selecting her words carefully. She found messages on Luca's phone. He's been covering for Adrian for years. Paying off women, threatening witnesses. She found receipts for payments to 3 different women from before they even met. So she finally believes Adrian's a predator. She found photos. My mom's voice broke. Photos Adrian had taken of women without their consent. Including, her breath caught. Including one of you from the engagement party. You didn't even know he was taking it. I slid into my bed feeling terrible. He had photos of me? Luca had been keeping them on his phone as insurance, in case you ever went public with the assault. Oh God! There's more, my mother added. Sophie found messages between the brothers from right after your wedding confrontation. Adrian was bragging about how he'd finally get to touch you during the processional. Luca was encouraging him. I could not talk. Luca took the phone from me and gently spoke with my mother while I pondered the information. What had my sister's fiancé and his brother been planning? What if I had walked down the aisle with Adrian? 3 days later, a letter appeared in Sophie's handwriting. Elena, I'm not sure where to begin with this. I'm sorry doesn't seem appropriate. I knew it was too difficult to express. But both are correct. I apologize. I knew when you told me about the restroom. Adrian always observed you during family gatherings, and I knew when I told you to walk with him. I knew. I picked my fairy tale above my sister. Luca showed me the images Adrian had taken of you. I laughed about them. Said it demonstrated your want for attention. That's when I realized what I'd been ignoring. What you and everyone else were trying to tell me. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I know now. I had always known. I was just too cowardly to admit it. I'm getting divorced. I am in treatment. I'm trying to figure out how I became someone who would sacrifice my sister for a wedding. You were correct about everything. I'm sorry I didn't listen. Sophia. I read the letter 3 times before presenting it to Luca. He held me as I cried, not joyful or sad tears, but tears of relief. Are you going to respond? He inquired. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't know. Whatever you decide, I'm here. The following few months were a whirl of legal proceedings and family dynamics. Adrian eventually pleaded guilty to lesser charges in order to avoid a trial, which included 8 months of probation, obligatory counseling, and a restraining order prohibiting him from contacting Amélie or me. Not enough, but something. Luca divorced Sophie as she refused to continue supporting Adrian. He attempted to force her to pay for the cancelled wedding, but her lawyer immediately shut that down. Sophie had also saved receipts for every threat, payoff, and cover-up the brothers had organized. I did not contact Sophie at this period, neither did she. Beyond that one letter, we were in parallel orbits, each healing independently from the tragedy of that connection. Julian broke the impasse. She asks about you, he stated over one of our frequent dinners. Every time I see her, what does she want to know? If you're okay. If you're happy. If you'll ever forgive her. I don't know if I can. I acknowledged. She knew Adrian assaulted me and still tried to force me to touch him. How do you forgive that? You don't have to, Luca replied. Forgiveness isn't mandatory. But as time passed, I began to think of Sophie differently. With empathy rather than rage. She had been so desperate for her fairy tale wedding that she had traded everything real for something unreal. She'd lost her sister, split her family, and married a man who helped his brother prey on women. A year after the wedding, I finally replied to her letter. Only one line. I am delighted you are getting help. She did not respond, but Julian informed me she cried when she read it. Life moved forward. Luca and I got engaged with a modest proposal at home. There's no need for huge gestures. We planned a small wedding for our closest family and friends. No large bridal parties, no forced pairings, and no drama. When it came time to send out invites, I glanced at Sophie's name on my list for a long time. Luca discovered me there, pen hovering over the envelope. You don't have to invite her, he replied. No one would blame you. I know. I set down the pen. I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. That's okay too. We married 6 months later, in a tiny ceremony in my parents' backyard. Julian was Luca's best man. Nico walked me down the aisle. My parents cried. Isabel delivered a great reading about choosing love over fear. Sophie wasn't present, but she sent a card. I wish you all the happiness I almost stole from you. May your marriage be founded on facts, not fairy tales. With love and regret. Sophia. I kept the card but did not react. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. But maybe that is acceptable. Perhaps the lesson is not about forgiveness or reconciliation. Perhaps it's about learning to choose yourself, even if it means sacrificing everything. Perhaps especially then.
At 15, my brother's practice shattered my trust. My parents called me a liar to save him, so I hid my SOS until justice finally found us. The worst betrayal of our lives? Leon Fisher, my brother, beat me at 15. In Leon's last year of high school, my mom said, "Think about his swimming scholarship." I had mono and spent much of my time in bed, too weak to stand. Around midnight, Leon entered my room. He said he needed practice for college females and that I'd become one since he left. I did not know what was happening until it was too late, since I was feverish and disoriented. Leon brushed my hair and said, "No one will ever believe you." I remained in my shower until the water ran cold, then walked to my parents' bed and roused them awake to tell them everything. It occurred to me that they would shield me. Mom gripped my shoulders and said, "I better not mess up his scholarship." Dad said Leon was their retirement plan, and Olympic swimmers could make millions. They had me recount what happened 4 times to find gaps in my tale. Dad asked, "Why didn't you stop him if it was that bad?" As Mom screamed about how I would destroy our family, I wondered if you wanted it. Dad reminded me that Leon's competition prize financed for my dance classes. By sunrise, they believed it was a misunderstanding. They told me not to discuss it again, especially with college scouts. However, I've never been quiet. I would expose Leon despite my parents' wishes. Unfortunately, Dad was a cop for 22 years with friends throughout the system. Every police in town knew him. The school resource officer phoned my dad after I reported it. He said, "Your girl's telling stories again," as if they had discussed me. Dad taught me how things worked that night. Friends always called him first. Any report I made went to him. "The system protects its own," he added quietly. I had to innovate. I wrote about it in my English journal, which teachers swore was private. After reading it, my teacher phoned my parents for a discussion, and they convinced her I was creating fiction for attention. That night, they removed my bedroom door hinges. "Privacy is earned with trust," Mom said. Leon grinned from the hallway. I focused on destroying him to avoid thinking about living with my rapist. My parents began volunteering at my school and blocked every attempt to contact the school counselor. They interrupted my lessons with worried smiles, describing their daughter's complex stories. The counselor saw me as a creative literary prodigy, not an abuse victim. My parents publicly complimented my inventiveness while covertly confiscating my laptop, phone, and other communication devices. Very nice. I would be a creative genius if they called me that. I was required to attend Leon's swim meets. I held supportive signs that read, "Help me," in the first letters. I learned Morse code and tapped SOS during extended family feasts. They saw a quirky teenage girl supporting her champion brother and with an active imagination, as my parents wanted. After each failure, they tightened control. They took me out of dance to promote Leon's career. From school, they homeschooled me to limit outside interaction. They told my pals to give me space to study and intercepted my calls. They agreed to let my best friend Clara Jensen come over for my birthday if I was monitored. Before she arrived, I wrote the truth on an index card and put it on my bookshelf in hopes she would notice. But Leon noticed it first and ripped it up in front of me before Clara came. He then smirked at me throughout her visit. My betrayal crushed my parents after Clara left. People said I was too psychologically unstable for visits. Mom said they found me writing scary family fiction. This makes subsequent claims look insane. In the morning, I vomited. Her expression calculated damage control as Mom bought pregnancy tests. She didn't ask if I was okay after the favorable results. She called Dad and said, "We have a situation." Hours later, all 3 came in, and Dad told me their plan. They told everyone I was pregnant by a dancing class boy. I'd go to boarding school but stay home until delivery. Leon's fame would endure. Leon knelt alongside me, stroking my stomach. "You'll never escape me now. Our bond is eternal." My break came then. I lost all my fight when I looked at my cop father, who blocked every escape path, my mother who favored her son over me, and my brother, whose baby was developing inside me. I tried everything, pushed hard to expose him. I ended myself pregnant and living with my abuser. They watched as months of restrained anxiety burst out in sobs. I stopped being hilarious, sister. Wasn't the creative genius asking for help? At 17, I was pregnant and defeated. We knew they won. The following days were foggy. Mom brought trays of food to my room and watched me eat. She'd sit on my bed and smooth my hair like she did when I was little. Her touch felt colder. Dad put a phone-streaming baby monitor in my room. For my safety, they said. Leon spent more time at home. He leaned against my doorframe with the same grin. He would leave baby name books on my bedside with pages marked with L names to indicate his zone. Intense homeschooling increased. Mom set a rigorous timetable. Every minute counted. Math 8:30, science 10 o'clock, lunch 12:30 sharp. She watched over my shoulder, adjusting my posture and restroom breaks. New locks on my room's windows required 2 keys. I tried to comply, too fatigued to struggle. Heavy morning sickness left me weak and unsteady. Mom held my hair back while I threw up, then resumed lesson planning like my body rebelling was just another nuisance. Dad switched shifts to ensure someone was home. Mom watched me while he worked. He took over her errands. My captors paired together military style. Even their disputes became deliberate, spoken behind closed doors so I couldn't use their dissension against them. Isolation was oppressive. I lost my phone for weeks. Dad's gun safe held my laptop. The new house phone lock required a code I didn't know. Dad was anxious about outside communication due to his police training, so he intercepted the mail. I noticed stuff, though. Small flaws in their immaculate system. Mother shook her hands when giving me pregnancy pills. Dad drank more beer at dinner, slurring his speech. Despite his confidence, Leon Fisher started checking behind him more. I casually asked Mom about genetic inheritance one afternoon in biology, about eye color and blood kinds. She answered robotically until I mentioned genetic testing. Her face blanched. She left the room after closing the textbook. They put all the science books in their bedroom that night. Days blurred. Wake up, throw up, pretend to study, eat and sleep under surveillance. My body transformed, making everything genuine. Clothing tightened. Reflection became stranger. Leon watched like I was his personal science experiment. My rebellions were little, unpunishable declarations of self. They couldn't tell how much my room changed as I moved my furnishings an inch each day. Mom's eye twitched when I hummed silly songs during meals. I wrote my replies in tiny handwriting throughout lessons, making her squint and lean closer. These weren't escapes. They were survival methods. Confirmation that I existed beyond their control, that below the defeat, I was still me. Doctor appointments were worst. Mom found a discreet house-calling family acquaintance. While Mom watched, he checked me in my room without asking the right questions for a pregnant 17-year-old. His silence was purchased. Another cog in their system. I tried to catch his attention during one visit to persuade him. He patted my hand and told Mom everything was fine. Like any of this was normal. I heard him and Dad discussing his son's police academy application after he departed. A favor exchanged. Another exit blocked. Leon became bolder throughout pregnancy. He rested his palm on my stomach during family dinners, saying he was delighted to be an uncle. Mom smiled at his maturity and Dad nodded. In their story, Leon was the brother who helped me. The boarding school tale changed with each iteration. Mom practiced it over the phone with relatives, describing my rebellious time and that dance crowd's harmful effect. The parents' swift damage control response when she told them seemed deliberate, like they'd considered this possibility. Mom immediately recalled the scholarship, and Dad emphasized retirement plans, making me wonder whether they saw warning signs but ignored them for their own gain. The worried mother with a mischievous daughter would cry on cue. Dad would take over when she became emotional, his policing authority making lies sound real. I discovered family secrets I didn't want, how readily they lied. Closed ranks fast. I was little compared to Leon's prospects. I learned new things about my loved ones every day. I was alone in the living room while Mom cooked dinner. I felt mocked by the Mantle family images. Leon's swim awards sparkled like deception. I lifted his medal, feeling its weight. Something so tiny to exchange a daughter for. Dad caught me holding it. Instead of fury, he seemed fatigued. He joined me on the couch, our closest encounter in weeks, without an intention. He might crack, I thought. May recall he was meant to guard me. He took the medal, polished it with his sleeve, and returned it. "Your brother works hard for these," he remarked. Only that. We played anxious parents, sympathetic brother and troubled daughter on the house stage. Even alone, I felt watched, assessed, and compared against their story. It was sometimes tempting to think I misinterpreted that night. The truth would return when I remembered Leon's weight and muttered threat. Mom bought neutral-colored, nameless baby clothes and put them in the guest room closet to prepare for a child who would never be mine. She had already contacted private adoption agencies that didn't check finances. My child would vanish, another secret under their ideal family image. I attempted to sense my increasing life, tried to detach it from its origin, but every movement reminded me of that night, Leon's hands, and my parents' choice. I felt chained to this house, family, and lying by the baby. After 2.5 months, something changed. In me, not them. My crushing defeat began to change. Cold determination, not hope. They thought they won, thought I was done. They relaxed, lazy in their watchfulness. I watched their routines carefully. Mom always showered at 7 o'clock. Dad maintained his weapons on Sundays. Leon practiced swimming nightly. Recruitment calls twice weekly. The house's rhythms and patterns could be exploited. My compliance calmed them. I took my pills, pretended to enjoy my courses, and even knitted baby booties with Mom's help. She was so delighted with my acceptance that she started left me alone longer. Still locked up, but not continually monitored. I explored my bounds by testing windows, doors, and mapping the house like a prisoner preparing escape. Avoid running, not yet. Just curious, I treasured my last power, information. The baby monitor in my room was my first modest win. I saw a blind area near the closet. A tiny spot where I may be invisible. I started sitting there unobserved. Though small, it was mine. Leon Fisher saw my compliance. He became cockier, pushed limits, sat too near during meals, rushed against me in hallways, and whispered about our kid when parents weren't, for a trial that may never happen. I remembered each transgression. Some night I heard them arguing. Actual arguing, not strategic whispering. Strain cracked Mom's voice. Frustrated Dad boomed. Leon failed a swim competition drug test. It was just marijuana, but it threatened his scholarship. The golden boy faded. Next morning things changed. Leon sulked during breakfast as Dad preached about responsibility. Even though Mom tried to fix him, the fractures were appearing. They had no idea how to handle their perfect son's fallibility. I ate my breakfast without a smile. However, a little spark of possibility ignited inside. If Leon or their system failed, I might not be as trapped as I believed. Swimming scholarship passion. Dad called coaches to limit damage. Mom investigated appeals and second chances. Leon needed counseling, drug testing, and proof he was worth investing on. They alternated between controlling me and saving him. In those cracks, I could breathe, think, and plan. Not escape yet, but something. The girl who attempted everything to expose Leon was still there, only exhausted and defeated. Waking up, she felt enraged. I resumed writing at 5 months pregnant. Observations, not complaints or requests. I initially remembered times, dates, and patterns like multiplication tables, then wrote them in tiny form on toilet paper in that blind location beside the closet. My evidence file grows. Family dinners become intelligence collecting. I asked harmless questions about Leon's swimming, Dad's employment, Mom's volunteering. They immediately responded, satisfied by my interest in family life. Every detail stashed away, mapping their lives beyond this place. I uncovered his weakness on a sweltering May evening. He complained of chlorine burns and scratched his shoulders at home. Mom applied aloe vera while I watched from the kitchen doorway. The pool chemicals usually affected his skin, but now it hurt more. His bathroom cabinet included prescription lotions he started using. That information joined my other collection in my head. 6 months pregnant, my body heavy and strange, I searched the house like a ghost for secrets. Mom started letting me help with laundry, supervised, of course, but I got pockets, receipts, ticket stubs, and napkin phone numbers. Leon's life outside these confines slowly formed in my mind. They become more careless during pregnancy. They misunderstood my swelling ankles, weariness, and frequent restroom breaks for submission. Mom stopped showering with me, trusting the sealed windows and her presence. Dad stopped obsessing over the baby monitor after his 3rd beer. I seriously tested boundaries. Small things initially. Moving stuff in Leon's room during practice, just enough to unnerve him. His lucky goggles moved from dresser to desk. Protein powder shifted shelves. He'd storm around accusing Mom of touching his belongings while she denied being there. These debates were minor victories, cracks in their united front. Mrs. Leclerc, my dance teacher, lived 5 streets away. Years ago, when I wanted private lessons, I memorized her address. I could see my path from my window. 5 blocks might as well have been 500 with the locks on the doors, but knowing she was so close kept the chance alive. Leon's drug test failure had hidden effects. Leon had to provide samples every Thursday at 3:30 for his coach's weekly testing. Since his Thursday practices were late, Dad had to fetch him up instead of Mom. A 90-minute window when only Mom was home and did her Thursday routine. Online grocery shopping from 4 to 5, headphones on, lists in mind. I practiced silent housewalking. Pregnancy altered my center of gravity, but I adjusted. Avoiding creaking floorboards became habitual. I marked doors that opened quietly and windows with loose locks. Not yet to flee, but knowledge felt like power, and I craved any control. The adoption paperwork was left on the kitchen counter one morning. Mom wanted me to see it, and know the plan would proceed regardless of me. Private adoption, closed records, a couple from 3 states away, my signature required, but they'd get around it. They always did. I studied the papers while eating breakfast, memorizing the agency's name, contact information, and any other relevant details. Mom watched me read for feedback. I gave her nothing. After eating cereal, I asked about the history lecture. It was clear she was disappointed. She wanted tears, resistance, and punishment. My cooperation became a weapon we both ignored. Leon's behavior became increasingly unpredictable as his swimming career threatened. He was haughty before, but now he was desperate. His voice alternated between confidence and panic for hours on the phone with instructors. He hated his golden boy tarnishing. He returned to my room at night. Stand in the doorway and watch me pretend to sleep. Not touch. On occasion, he whispered about the baby's name and swimming ability. I lay quietly, breathing steadily while my skin crawled. My parents stopped reviewing the baby monitor footage, another system flaw. When Dad polishes trophies and his daughter possesses assault proof, that family snapshot changes. Discuss priorities shining right there. 7 months pregnant, I felt the baby flutter and kick for the first time. The feeling froze me mid-math problem, pencil hovering. Mom was intrigued and noticed quickly. She touched my stomach without asking. Waited. She smiled again when the baby kicked, like I remembered. Her eyes flickered briefly. Doubt, remorse. However, Leon Fisher, fresh from exercise, entered and sharpened her expression. She put her hand down and resumed the lesson. But I saw a tiny breach in her armor. Dad drank more. He was too controlled to fall down. The beer count rose. He spoke harsher and lost tolerance. He complained about swimming scouts, college tuition, and how one misstep could wreck everything. He meant Leon's drug test. But his comments hit me differently. House felt smaller daily. I was limited to these rooms, people, and circumstances. I learned in that diminishing world. The patterns, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities of every moment are recorded. I was stuck, but I could only examine them. Leon failed another drug test. Adderall, not marijuana. He claimed it was for studying, that everyone used it, and that the examination was unfair. Dad was furious and angry. Real tears from Mom. Under final assessment, the scholarship was at risk. They were scrambling to preserve their collapsing retirement plan. Leon became the spotlight. His grades improved with tutors. Dad arranged community service for him. Mom took him to volunteer at the hospital, food bank, or anywhere the review board would approve. He had to appear repentant, dedicated, and deserving of another shot. Their passion provided me space. Mom left me alone longer, thinking pregnancy and sealed doors would keep me in check. She ran off to drive Leon, leaving me worksheets with warnings to stay put. She stopped checking the baby monitor feed, stopped checking if I'd finished the homework, and stopped worrying about anything but Leon's future. I prepared throughout every free moment. Detailed toilet paper records recorded times, dates, patterns, and weaknesses. When I had internet, I learned to pick simple interior door locks with bobby pins from YouTube tutorials. Bathroom lock gave way first, then hall closet. Small yet significant wins. Nearly 8 months pregnant, I overheard my life's most crucial conversation. Mom and Dad assumed I was asleep after the morning's lessons, but I was in the closet's blind spot, ear to the wall. Sound carried well through their bedroom wall, they didn't realize. They discussed adoption again, but more urgently. The 3-state pair had backed out due to questions about the father and the situation. Mom offered her Oregon sister Isabelle Laurent, who had been trying to conceive for years, instead of the agency's suggestion. Mom said, "Keep it in the family. Controlling the story is easier." Mom persuaded Dad, even though Isabel had never liked him and labeled him controlling previously. It was family. Isabel would raise the baby, and I would have no claim. No DNA tests, queries, or Leon-related paper trail. "It's perfect," Mom exclaimed. "Foolproof." I laid in my blind area, hand on stomach, feeling the baby kick. Isabel, or Aunt Isa, sent me birthday cards every year until my parents stopped communication. He called her a terrible influence, liberal and nosy. Why? I now understand. She saw through Dad's facade and undoubtedly suspected something was wrong in our immaculate household. The plan crystallized over several days. Mom told Isabel about teenage errors and family honor. She practiced the discussion in the mirror, polishing her worried mother performance. Dad grumbled, but moved on to Leon's review board hearing. Leon felt the change. He became more confident that his parents would repair everything again. He would lean close over dinner and speak about how the kid would grow up, calling him Uncle Leon, how he would visit Oregon and be part of its life, and how I would never escape him. Not really. He miscalculated. They all did. Because Isabel agreed to take the kid but wanted to meet me first, alone. Aunt and niece hooking up without parents or supervision. Isabel persisted when Mom refused. No meeting, no deal. She was always stubborn. The negotiation lasted days. Phone calls and whispers. Mom pacing kitchen. Dad compromises. Finally, they accepted supervised visit. Isabel would visit the house and spend an hour with me as Mom waited in the next room. Close enough to intervene, distant enough to provide the idea of seclusion. I had 1 hour to convey years of torture, months of confinement, and lifetime betrayal. Toilet paper notes failed. Mom would search me first. Speaking freely was impossible with Mom listening. I learned to be creative under pressure. I learned that from this family. I prepared well for Isabel's visit the morning of. I choose my clothes carefully. Did my hair the way she'd taught me years earlier. French braids, though we both knew they were merely braids with a fancy name. A sign or remembrance of how we were before my parents divorced. Mom peered in my mouth, shoes, and pockets like I was carrying contraband. Nothing was there. Thus she discovered nothing. My head held all I needed, organized and ready. Isabel arrived promptly at 2 o'clock. Though older and grayer, her eyes were bright, intelligent, and saw everything. She turned to me after stiffly hugging Mom. Her face was neutral, but I saw her fear at my look. Being nearly 8 months pregnant at 17 shocked everybody. Mom watched the kitchen doorway from the living room, nearby enough to hear normal conversation, but too far to hear whispers. Isabel inquired about school, hobbies, and pregnancy. My words were carefully chosen for Mom, but my hands spoke differently. Sign language. Isabel taught me the basics when I was 10 on a summer visit. She said our secret language for fun. Mom was too enthralled by Leon's swim meets to notice. I practiced in my room for months, slowly regaining muscle memory. Mom thought my hand gestures were typical as I spoke. However, Isabel Laurent watched every step, her face blank as she read my genuine message. Help. Leon RP parents. No, please, trap. She didn't respond, only asking banal baby name and nursery color questions. But her hands started moving, small movements concealed in perfectly typical handbag, hair, and clothing adjustments. Yes, I understand. Working on it. Be ready. The hour flew by. Isabel hugged me goodbye, lips close my ear. Her murmured 3 words were too quiet for Mom. Thursday, 3:30. Thursday. Leon's drug test. The 90-minute time frame. My heart raced as I nodded, attempting to be upset about her leaving. Their muttering was unintelligible as Mom led her to the door. After Isabel left, I was alone with my racing thoughts. Mom watched me all day for rebellion. I taught her robotically without giving her anything. I politely asked adoption questions at dinner, portraying the resigned adolescent accepting her fate. Dad was happy. Leon grinned. Mom gradually relaxed. But Thursday was 2 days away, and I had hope for the first time in months. Wednesday passed agonizingly slowly. I kept my routine, appeared unaffected. But within, I felt electrified with possibility. Isabel understood. She was creating. I only needed readiness. I compiled all my toilet paper notes into 1 page that night. Names, dates, and the worst proof. My proof had to count if I had 1 chance. They never checked my bra, so I hid it there, folded little against my skin. Thursday morning was cloudy and rainy. Mom grumbled about driving in the rain while making breakfast. Dad left early for work. Leon ate hastily, fearing his drug test. Everything normal, everything routine. Trying to ignore the clock, I ate toast at the table. Too sluggish and too quick. 3:30. Leon grabbed his swim bag. Mom took her keys. Pickup times, supper plans, and family logistics were discussed. I wrote a Rome history essay at the table. My captivity Thursday again. 3:30. The home quieted. Mom hid in her room with her laptop and headphones, planning meals and grocery lists. I waited 5, then 10 minutes. Desperate for sound. I thoroughly checked each floorboard at 3:45. My usual bathroom first. That wouldn't bother Mom. Instead of using the toilet, I stood by the window, heart racing. Always loose, the lock wiggled in its frame. Mom is doing airport security-style pocket checks, while forgetting her sister taught this kid sign language years ago. Sometimes the genuine escape strategy was obvious. I checked it countless of times, but never forced it. Pushing, using a towel-wrapped hand. Lock held. I pushed harder with pregnancy weight. It creaked. Another shove. Desperation helps. The lock broke free with a thunderous sound in the calm house. I froze, listening. No steps. Mom didn't call. Just a faraway keyboard tap. Rain pelted my face when the window opened. Freedom was a 6-foot plunge to moist grass. Feasible, if careful. If the baby, I couldn't think about it. Could only think about the following few seconds. I squeezed through the window, belly scraping the frame, hung from my fingertips, then let go. The contact wrenched my legs, but I stood. No pain, no cramping, just adrenaline, rain, and the unexpected reality of being outside. 5 blocks to Mrs. Leclerc's house wasn't the plan anymore. An automobile with blinking danger lights idled at the corner. Isabel drives with a worried face. Rain soaked my clothes as I waddled toward her. Silence from the home, Mom unaware when shopping. I pushed open the passenger door and sat down. Isabel drove before I closed it. We turned a bend, hiding my jail, was gone. Free, the impossibility made me dizzy. Isabel drove silently for some minutes, separating us from the home. She finally stopped in a parking lot and looked at me. Face crushed. She hugged me hard and I broke. She embraced me and whispered reassurances as months of controlled cries flow forth. Once I could breathe, she pulled back, gently touching my shoulders. She glared with protective wrath. She asked if I was harmed and needed hospitalization. Shaking my head, I took out my folded evidence. After reading, she was pale and enraged. Mom found me missing after 30 minutes. Isabel had a plan, not the police. She knew Dad's links, not yet. First, we needed a safe place where they couldn't reach me. She hired a motel 2 towns over with cash and a phony name. There, we'd decide next moves. The drive was weird. Traffic lights, strip malls, people living normally. I forgot the world outside those walls. Isabel suspected something was wrong for years. Parents cutting contact confirmed it. She hired a private investigator to discover the homeschooling and seclusion. Mom knew she had her chance when she called about the adoption. Cheap yet clean motel. 2 beds, a kitchenette, an inside locked door. I was amazed by the space and freedom to roam without supervision in the midst of the room. Isabel ordered pizza, my first self-ordered dinner in months. While we ate, she detailed next actions. Dad's connections couldn't reach her family law lawyer buddy. Apply for emergency custody and a restraining order. The pregnancy complicated things, but evidence helped. Leon's DNA proved everything. I'd forgotten the sense of connection after so long without my phone. Isabel gave me hers to check social media and see what happened in my world. My friends were now teens. Clara Jensen dated. My dance team won regionals. Life went on without me. Isabel received Mom's call at 6 o'clock, leaving it on voicemail. Dad's number follows. Then unknown numbers, perhaps Dad's cop friends. Unanswered calls seemed like miniature rebellions. They knew they'd lost control. Soon after, texts began with threats disguised as concern. Confused, unstable mind, threatening the child. Report Isabel for kidnapping. Friends of Dad were looking. I needed to return home quickly for safety. Escalation was expected, but writing it made it real. Isabel Laurent kept screenshots, voicemails, and evidence. Her lawyer acquaintance was preparing paperwork. Our legal protection would arrive in the morning. I felt safe sleeping for the first time in months. However, safety was ephemeral. Dad was beating on the door, demanding entrance. Maybe the motel manager sold us out for less than he paid for petrol. Isabel was up, capturing everything with her phone. She told Dad through the door that she was contacting 911, not his friends. He must justify pestering a pregnant minor who fled abuse. The pounding stopped, whispers outside, then footsteps. We witnessed Dad and 2 uniformed officers leave in their automobiles through the peephole. They would return. But actual examination had worked for now. Not staying in the motel. Isabel had a backup plan, naturally. Friends with cabins an hour away, off the grid enough to buy us time. Packing fast, we left before daybreak. We escaped via darkness on vacant roads. A modest yet secure cabin was set in forests. Lack of neighbors and access. Cell connectivity was poor, but that made us harder to trace. Isabel's friend brought baby goods. They'd planned this rescue longer than I thought. The first day of independence felt forever. No plan, no surveillance, no worry. I slept when tired, ate when hungry, and went outside whenever I chose. My body was used to confinement and didn't know how to process the spaciousness. I kept looking over my shoulder for Leon's grin or Mom's displeasure. Daniel Moreau, Isabel's lawyer acquaintance, was soft-spoken with piercing eyes and a briefcase full of legal weapons. He gently requested my statement, and asked tough questions without judgment. He said the evidence was strong. A pregnancy proved it. Leon's DNA sealed it. First, we required emergency custody petitions, restraining orders, and medical records to protect me. If we played it correctly, Dad's trap could protect me. Daniel had ties to judges who wouldn't be persuaded by small-town police allegiance. Legal machinery moved faster than planned. Within 72 hours, temporary orders arrived. My parents couldn't reach 300 meters. Emergency custody for Isabel. Prenatal treatment was ordered by the court. The cage had grown, yet I was still locked. My first doctor's checkup confirmed my suspicions. The infant developed normally despite everything. 8 months pregnant, due in 6 weeks, the scan revealed a girl. Leon's kid, my daughter. The quiet chamber was weighty with the truth's intricacy. She held my hand during every test and question. The doctor was courteous but meticulous, documenting injuries I'd forgotten, faded bruises, and unnoticed scars, evidence of damage beyond the visible. Daniel built a wall around me with each note in my file. Morning hikes, afternoon naps, and nighttime chats with Daniel became habits in our cabin retreat. I started journaling in an actual notebook, spilling out months of suppressed ideas, anxieties, and plans. Words flew like water from a busted dam. Mom posed as a worried mother of a disturbed teen to reach out to relatives. Most saw through it, but some wavered. Mental illness was more believable than the unpleasant facts. Isabel answered the calls with steely voice, preserving my serenity. Leon moved after 2 weeks of freedom. Not directly, he was too smart for that. But social media filled with old images of us at swim meets, family vacations, and birthday celebrations. I miss my best friend's sister and hope for help. Victimizing a gullible audience. Comments ranged from positive to suspicious. Some appreciated his care for his troubled sister. Others praised his timing and performance. Some courageous folks probingly inquired about the pregnancy and why I left. The remarks vanished soon, but Isabel screenshotted them. Daniel submitted Leon's public display as evidence of harassment, violating the restraining order's spirit, if not letter. The judge concurred. Leon was instructed to remove all posts mentioning me and stop discussing the subject. His first legal loss hurt. The Swimming Scholarship Review Board decided. Leon left. Too many failed tests, controversy. His Olympic hopes vanished quickly. Dad's retirement failed. Mom's golden kid was another failed high school athlete. Nothing had been gained by my family's sacrifice. The news came via Daniel's contacts. I waited for vindication, but felt hollow. So much was destroyed for so little. They gave up their daughter for a dream that failed the first test. I felt exhausted by the waste. 3 weeks free. The cottage seemed healing, not concealing. I learned to prepare simple meals and trust myself. Isabel gave me labor-breathing exercises to prepare me. Though considering adoption, she never pursued it. "My choice," she said. "I choose always." The letter was from Clara Jensen, not my parents. Her emotional handwriting was sent to Daniel's office. She understood, she wrote. My disappearance, birthday visit, pregnant timeline. Mom shopping online while her daughter breaks out through a window felt really convenient. Like she knew, but chose not to know. Watching someone escape after months of being trapped makes me wonder what made today different from all the other days she could have tried. Shame on her for not seeing it sooner. She regrets believing their falsehoods. Apologies for everything. Reading her words. My dearest buddy, lost to manipulation, finding truth, made me cry. She wanted to assist and testify. She and her parents backed me. The silence my family established was crumbling, letting truth in. Teachers who were suspicious but silent. Neighbors who saw the seclusion. And Coach Rinaldi, horrified that she missed the indications, wrote more. Each letter confirmed that I hadn't imagined it all incorrectly. People noticed, wondered, and were deflected by my parents' skillful performance. The custody hearing loomed like a storm. Daniel Moreau taught me what to wear, how to speak, and what counted most. The judge would decide if Isabel Lauren's emergency custody became permanent, if the restraining orders held, and if I would stay free or be returned to them. My parents retained expensive lawyers and played all cards. They said I was mentally ill due to pregnancy-induced delusions. Isabel manipulated a weak child. Dad's record was flawless. Mom is reputable. Community leaders, worried parents face a troubled teen's bogus claims. Daniel did his homework. After Dad intervened, other middle school girls stopped complaining about Leon Fisher. He found Mom's anxiety medication, wine bottles in the garage, and the paper trail of control, isolation, and manipulation. The hearing lasted 3 days. I testified in camera before a judge, recounting every detail, violation, and unsuccessful escape attempt because I was too pregnant to face them. To prove the truth, toilet paper notes and adoption paperwork with fraudulent signatures were presented. Leon testified, with damaged innocence and fraternal compassion. Daniel ran a surgical cross-examination, his presence in my room that night. Why? Why was the pregnancy timing exact? Would he take a paternity test? Though his lawyers disagreed, the harm was done. His sneer fell, showing the predator. On the stand, Mom broke. Questions concerning the locked windows, removed door, and baby monitor weakened her prepared explanation. Her hands shook like while giving me vitamins. Dad tried to calm her with looks, but she was beyond him. Broken phrases, half admissions, and deflected blame revealed the reality. Dad stayed strong. 22 years of testifying experience helped him. But he couldn't explain the evidence. The calls to fellow police, the intercepted reports, and the systematic isolation his professional network employed to capture his daughter. The judge's visage hardened with each confession. The judge granted Isabel full custody on day 3. Permanent restraining orders. Recommended criminal investigation. My parents' lawyer muttered about charges, turning them white. Leon sank in his chair, realizing that Golden Boys had consequences. The small swarm of reporters Daniel had intentionally notified was avoided by leaving through a side door. Now the news would spread, destroying their reputation. Dad's career ends. Mom's reputation ruined. Leon's future ended. They gave everything for him and lost it. I felt the baby sink and pressure rise at the cabin. 8 months pregnant, 2 weeks till due date. Free but carrying my rapist's child. Triumph and birth, delight and dread in equal measure. Isabel brewed tea while I processed what transpired. The baby decision was made that night. No adoption, not to strangers or Isabel. I would retain, raise, and adore her regardless of her background. She was innocent and deserved a chance. Parents taught me not to do things. I'd figure it out. A week later, contractions began around 2 a.m., with rain hitting the windows. Isabel drove cautiously to the hospital, maintaining her calmness throughout this trauma. No more lies. I was admitted under my own name. Kind nurses, private room, everything my parents would have denied me. Labor was 14 hours. Isabel supported me through every pain wave. I wondered if Mom held my hand like this when I was born, before Leon, prior to swimming, before choosing him over me. Physical pain and grief should have been tears. Screaming and perfect, she arrived at 4:47 p.m. The nurse put her on my chest, and everything changed. Violence formed this tiny human, born into love. I named her Amelie because she symbolized hope for recovery and a future beyond trauma. Isabel cried when she held her grandniece for the first time, whispering promises of protection and the family we'd build. The family I chose, not the one I was born into. Though unconventional, it was real. Daniel arrived the next day with paperwork. Birth certificate listing father as unknown, my choice to make when Amelie was older. Custody documents preventing my parents from claiming her, and protection orders for her entire life. Legal protection against her grandparents. We learned to breastfeed, swaddle, and be mother and daughter in the hospital for 3 days. Nobody questioned my age anymore. Teen parenthood was widespread, and my tale was public. The nurses respected me without judgment, small kindnesses that meant everything. Isabel had a cradle by my bed, diapers, and little clothes washed and folded when we returned to the cabin. She planned everything while I labored, building the nest my mother should have. Actual love. Not words. Feeding, changing, and sleeping blurred in the first weeks. Amelie was a calm baby, as if required. Isabel did night turns so I could relax and prepare. We created rhythms and habits that differed from captivity. Natalie, Mrs. Rosenberg, and others who'd learned the truth wrote letters of support, love, and help, filling the gap my family had created. I was no longer alone. Was never really. Just isolated by those who should have protected me. Criminal investigations progressed slowly. Leon was arrested and released on bond, draining my parents' savings. Dad's pension was frozen during investigation. Mom sold jewelry and the house to pay lawyers, shattering their empire as surely as mine. I didn't pay attention. Beyond protecting us, had no energy for their collapse. Amelie needed me, not revenge fantasies. Her first smile, chuckle, and strong grip on my finger were all victories they sought to steal. In our rustic hideaway, 3 months passed. Our secret sanctuary was snowed in early winter. I turned 16 quietly while Isabel baked a cake and Amelie rested. No party, no friends, just us. It seemed like more than all the previous birthdays combined. I could eat cake, make wishes, and hope they came true. Trial was scheduled for April. Daniel knew it would be brutal, their lawyers battling dirty, but the evidence was overwhelming. My tale inspired other victims to speak up. Leon's pattern emerged after the failed substance test. The golden boy was tarnished long before. I concentrated on hope, healing, and rebuilding the life they stole. Began online classes to graduate high school. Researched young, mother-friendly colleges, planned beyond survival. Once unthinkable, the future is now possible. Isabel never asked our stay length. We had the cabin for as long as needed. However, I knew we would leave and find our own place. For now, the trees and solitude were healing. Amelie strengthened. My strength increased. Together, we strengthened. Dreamed about them several nights. Now, sorrowful dreams of what could have been, not nightmares. A parent who guarded. Mother who favored daughter over son. A brother who saw sister, not prey. But grief and Amelie's hungry cries always arrived. Now reality beat dreams. The probe revealed more than expected. Dad's favors and cover-ups suppressed other families and buried other atrocities until someone broke ranks. My departure caused an avalanche of truth that buried their carefully prepared lies. The grand jury heard testimony from Leon's other victims, girls from swim team, school, and parties where parents assumed their children were safe. In retrospect, he was the golden boy who took what he wanted and was shielded by blind parents. I was merely the simplest one to reach. Mom wrote one last letter through her lawyer, explaining, not apologizing, how she was taught to prefer sons to daughters, how Dad convinced her I was troubled before that night. Leon was her time to shine as more than a cop's wife. She apologized for my confusion. I burned it in Isabel's fireplace, seeing her excuses vanish. Understanding and forgiving differed. Mom's letter explaining why she chose her son above her daughter was burned. Some excuses should be smoke signals rather than saved. I understood, but forgiveness might take forever. Amelie deserved a mother who protected her heart. The April trial began on Tuesday. Again, I testified by video with Amelie dozing in my arms. I spoke my mind without shame. The defenders tried their strategies, but I was stronger. Survivor mother, not child who could be silenced. My voice solid as I recalled every detail they sought to suppress. The prosecutor asked meticulous inquiries for another hour. I held Amelie against my chest, feeling her tiny heartbeat as I explained the closed windows, removed door, and baby monitor that recorded my incarceration. Many objections from the defense attorney were overruled by the judge. Evidence trumped their protests. After my testimony, I put down the laptop and focused on Amelie. Isabel prepared bottles because stress could impact my milk production. While the trial continued without us, we sank into the cabin's calm routine. Daniel called every night to update the events in a neutral voice. A steady prosecution case grew. Leon cornered girls in vacant locker rooms at swim meets, according to other girls. Coaches received complaints from parents, but Dad buried every report. One mother sobbed over her daughter's decision to stop swimming because she was afraid of Leon's pool. On day 4, Mrs. Rosenberg testified. She described how my parents cut off all dance contact and my sudden retreat. Mom threatened harassment charges if she tried to contact her about her star student's disappearance. The dance teacher's testimony showed systematic isolation that the defense couldn't deny. Natalie's testimony stung most. She detailed our friendship, a birthday visit, and my desperate attempts to communicate. The index card was hidden beneath other books on the shelf. Leon tore it up and missed a piece. She kept it, unaware of its significance until my absence. I wrote, "He hurt me," on the ripped part, which the prosecutor placed into evidence, with wobbly letters. The defense used character witnesses and doubt. Leon's effort garnered praise from swim coaches who avoided mentioning their neglected objections. Church acquaintances testified about my parents' dedication and concern for their disturbed daughter, but cross-examination exposed knowledge gaps and assumptions founded on carefully prepared lies. Dad's former partner testified for the defense that he was a great officer. Under cross-examination, he admitted to taking calls about me and reporting to Dad instead of following protocol. His attempt to pass it off as professional courtesy failed when the prosecutor pointed out the department policy breach. Week 2 revealed forensics. The prosecution subpoenaed medical data to piece together a calendar of isolation. No doctor visits for over a year except inconspicuous house calls, no dentist appointments, no eye checks. A youngster wiped from all systems that could have detected abuse. The jury took notes as experts highlighted this pattern's rarity. Leon's DNA test findings were clinically accurate. The prosecutor didn't need to explain. The figures spoke. Amelie's parents were known. The timeline is certain. The judge promptly rejected Leon's attorney's consent request. State legislation prohibited consent due to age and family ties. My parents' financial records showed their dedication to Leon. Cash-paid tutors, swimming coaches with bonuses, and a college consultant hired to repair his reputation after the substance test failures. Every dollar spent on him while I was imprisoned, pregnant with his kid. The adoption agency testified regarding Mom's request for closed adoption. No questioning. Premium costs for discretion. The agency director appeared uncomfortable on the stand, saying they had worries, but the money had convinced them. Their testimony deepened the cover-up. Isabel testified of discovering me at the cottage on day 10, her voice steady. She described my physical condition. Malnourished despite pregnancy, restraint-related bruises on my arms, and flinching at rapid movements. Every snapshot she took was shown to the jurors. I stayed at the cabin during her testimony, unwilling to see my trauma clinically. The defense tried to portray Isabel as an angry relative who kidnapped a confused teen, but she was prepared. She kept receipts for the private investigator, tapes of Mom's adoption calls, and records of everything she did to save me. Her evidence showed months of planning while my condition deteriorated. Next, Daniel submitted custody case records. My parents' position was strengthened by the family court judge's verdict, which detailed the systematic isolation, window locks, and communication device removal in formal processes they couldn't dispute. Another judge had considered the evidence believable. The criminal trial jury heard. The prosecution used professors who noted changes in me before I left school as character witnesses. My English instructor presented her journal from that year with my abuse entry. She reported it according to policy, yet it disappeared from official channels. Dad's interference was evident, but impossible to prove. Leon's substance test fails, and behavioral issues were testified by the swimming association. He was maintained on the squad despite several breaches due to his talent and Dad's pressure. The speaker sounded relieved to finally admit that special treatment had permitted harsher behavior. Mom's California sister testified via air. Leon's excessive attention and my isolation were evident at family occasions. She tried to talk to Mom about family therapy, but was ignored. Her evidence showed that several family members noticed something wrong, but were silenced. The prosecution's closing argument lasted 2 hours. The prosecutor painstakingly reviewed each piece of evidence to show systematic abuse and cover-up. She highlighted power dynamics: a cop father who controlled local systems, a mother who favored her son over her daughter, and a sibling who knew he was safe. The jury listened closely as she connected every dot, defense closing trying to cast doubt. I was portrayed as a troubled kid who made up stories for attention, seduced her brother, and fled when caught. They had too many gaps in their story. Why locks? Why the solitude? Why the recorded injuries? The mass of evidence foiled their victim blame strategy. The jury deliberated 3 days. I focused on Amelie, trying not to think about the 12 strangers choosing my truth. Isabel taught me to recognize winter birds on walks in the woods to kill time. Daniel promised to call after the ruling. The call arrived Thursday afternoon. All guilty. As Daniel listed the convictions: aggravated sexual assault, false imprisonment, child endangerment, conspiracy, I sat down hard with Amelie sleeping in my arms. The jurors believed me and saw through my family's falsehoods. Justice through the system I thought would never defend me. Next month was sentencing. Leon might serve decades in prison, Daniel said. Dad's career ended despite his pending allegations. Mom was tried for conspiracy and child endangerment. Prison walls would divide Leon's family, which had sacrificed everything. I skipped sentencing. Daniel reported Leon's 25 years, parole eligibility in 15. He cried when the judge read the sentence, realizing consequences had caught up. Dad received 10 years for governmental misconduct and conspiracy. 5 years with probation after 2 for Mom. A lovely family scattered in prisons. The residence was auctioned for legal fees. Dad's pension compensated victims. Leon's swimming trophies and Mom's jewelry barely covered their commissary bills. All they built while imprisoning me crumbled. Evidence lockers ruined the Golden Boy's medals. Finally, prison letters arrived. Dad, justifying, blaming everyone but himself. Mom, pity-filled, asks why I damaged the family. Leon's, the darkest, graphic warnings concerning his freedom. Isabel submitted them all for future restraining orders. Even in prison, they tried to control me. However, Leon's heartbroken girls wrote to thank me for speaking up. Parents who suspected but were hushed now apologize for not pushing more. Coach Rinaldi gave me free dance classes when I was ready. My family isolated me, but this community supported me. Amelie strengthened daily. Her first rollover at 6 months made her chuckle at her accomplishment. Karma peaked when the house sold at auction for legal fees. Leon's swimming trophies went to the garage sale as Amelie rolls over and lives her finest baby life. Her ambition to crawl at 7 months matched mine. She stood on furniture at 8 months, eager to move toward our future. I graduated high school online with honors despite everything. Resilience and survival essays were submitted to colleges. Many institutions provided full scholarships to young mothers, knowing my circumstances hadn't defined me. I carefully built the future my parents sought to steal through education. Isabel got us a 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment near the State University with a tiny yard for Amelie. We celebrated her first birthday with chocolate cake and unsteady steps. The cottage was refuge, but it was time to return. I received individual and group therapy to process the trauma. Realizing hypervigilance was normal. Rebuilding trust takes time. Amélie attended university daycare while I took classes, progressively learning to live in lock-free spaces. Local criminal cases were covered, but I didn't read. Daniel managed legal concerns, insulating me from proceedings. Appeals were rejected. Prison sentences began. The system that had failed me eventually worked, slowly but surely toward justice. 2 years. Amélie learned to talk and delighted in calling Isabel Gamma and me Mama. I majored in social work to aid captive kids. Family Crisis Center internships showed me how many tales were similar. The system requires inside experts. Leon's first parole hearing failed. He had repeated harassment convictions for writing about me to other convicts. Official records showed his remorselessness. His next chance was a decade away. Dad lost his first appeal. Mom served her minimal sentence but had trouble finding accommodation. Amélie toddling across the stage for my summa cum laude graduation. Multiple agencies offered jobs to someone who knew family trauma well. I joined State Child Protective Services, full circle from the system that failed me. It was demanding but rewarding. Home visits where I saw signals others missed, court evidence where my experience weighed in. Protecting children from my suffering, case by case. Amélie learned that some families wounded rather than protected. Yet love could be chosen. I bought a tiny house in a decent school area 5 years following our escape. Despite her background, Amélie entered kindergarten confident. Isabel was our toughest defender and lived close. We rebuilt the family my parents had destroyed. Chosen, supporting, authentic. Mom sent one last letter after discharge. She lived alone in a halfway house on minimal wage. She demanded grandmother's rights to meet Amélie. Daniel shut it down quickly. Her conviction had revoked her parental rights. She couldn't claim the granddaughter she sold. 7-year-old Amélie asked about her father. I gave her the age-appropriate truth. He hurt me and couldn't be in our lives. She took it with the wisdom of a child, focused on her dance presentation. Mrs. Rosenberg fulfilled her promise, teaching Amélie to love movement I'd almost lost. Anniversaries eased. Each October brought more freedom, choices, and life outside shuttered windows. Amélie's birthdays honored our survival and hers. We both emerged from trauma better. My policy advocacy included testifying before state committees about mandated reporting failures, teaching police departments on family violence dynamics, and creating mechanisms to detect what others missed. Systemic change, policy by policy. Despite honor roll, dance team, and friends whose parents knew our background but assessed us by our present, Amélie thrived. Born ferocious and protected, she learned that strength comes from surviving and helping others do so. My clinical social work master's degree came 10 years later. Established a trauma healing private practice. Supervised interns like me. Survivors willing to turn grief into purpose. The healing cycle spreading. While fighting another inmate, Leon perished in prison in his 11th year. Uncertain details. Daniel calling with the news didn't bother me. Amélie practiced soccer. Isabel cooking. Life continued for the man who sought to destroy us. Nothing altered after his death. Our lives were built without him. Dad died of a jail yard heart attack after 8 years. With their old friends gone, Mom attended his funeral alone. She wrote one last letter to apologize. Late. Too little. Like the others, I filed it unopened. At 15, Amélie was confident where I was desperate, protected where I was trapped, and adored where I was deceived. She understood her story's beginning, but wrote her own chapters. College prep classes, crisis center volunteer work, law school plans, justice in her blood, but not her identity. Isabel aged beautifully, her fierce protection becoming proud support. She walked me down the aisle when I married Daniel's law partner, a lovely man who understood survival, with Amélie as my maid of honor, and our chosen family in attendance. No blood relatives needed. 20 years after my October escape, I keynoted a social worker conference on domestic violence. I spoke from experience, but PowerPoint presentations were clinical. Amelie watched her mother lecture from trauma in the crowd. The girl who called SOS during family feasts circles back. The address closed with survival rates, intervention tactics, and change hope. However, I remembered that 15-year-old pregnant and defeated girl who found power in her closet blind spot. She wrote evidence on toilet paper and learned sign language to survive, who jumped from a bathroom window into rain and freedom. I taught, demonstrated, and proved survival with my narrative. However, it was mostly mine. A girl who had refused to be silent, built a life from ashes, and chosen love above legacy. Like any teenager, Amelie checked her phone while sitting, impatient with her mother's work. Her ordinary life without my spectacular story was her greatest accomplishment. We swapped business cards and made plans to collaborate after the convention. Amelie, newly licensed and careful with her cargo, drove us home. Isabel waited with dinner, our weekly tradition. 3 generations of chosen family, proof that love can be established. I put away the conference materials and helped Amelie with mathematics homework that night. Daily life, earned and valued. Locks on our doors opened from inside, windows unbarred. Freedom became so routine we barely noticed. Living through pain rather than fate was the greatest victory.